Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The Case of Johnia Berry. Johnia Berry was born on August 26, 1983 in the small town of Bristol, Tennessee, USA. She is cheerful, friendly, has many friends, and often goes to parties. While in school, Johnia was a member of the local cheerleading squad. After graduating from high school, she studied psychology and criminology at East Tennessee State University. While in college, she met Jason White, they became a couple, and they got engaged before graduating in late 2004. When Johnia was 21, she decided to continue her studies to get a master's degree in psychology, so she temporarily moved to Knoxville. While studying, she worked part-time at a child education center and realized her passion for helping children. Her boyfriend, Jason, studied law in another state. Despite the distance, they kept in touch and planned their wedding. While in Knoxville, Johnia stayed at a classmate Jason Amami's apartment. They had attended college together and moved to Knoxville together. They shared a two-bedroom apartment, and Johnia stayed until she found her own place. Johnia had two part-time jobs, one at a jewelry store and one at a children's hospital. On the evening of Sunday, December 5th, after working at the store, Johnia went to the mall to do some Christmas shopping. When she got home, she wrapped presents for the children at the daycare center, chatted with her neighbors, and then went to her room. Before going to sleep, she talked to her boyfriend. Around 4 a.m., Jason Amami heard Johnia screaming. He thought Johnia was having a nightmare, so he went into her room, but instead of Johnia, Jason Amami saw a stranger holding a knife. The stranger attacked Jason Amami, and they struggled. He eventually pushed the attacker away and ran out of the apartment. He went to the nearest convenience store, about a mile away, to call for help. The store clerk found him covered in blood and called 911. The police arrived at Jason Amami and Johnia's apartment and found Johnia in the hallway connecting 5 apartments. She was still alive but barely conscious. When asked about her attacker, she gave only vague clues. The police searched the entire building and the surrounding area but could not find the attacker. They took Johnia to the nearest hospital, but despite the doctor's best efforts, she died. The doctor said that Johnia had suffered more than 20 stab wounds and that her chances of survival were slim. Meanwhile, Jason Amami had suffered 8 injuries from the attacker, but only one was serious. He was treated and his life was not in danger. At the same time, detectives began investigating the scene. They found blood in the hallway, indicating that Johnia had tried to call for help from neighbors, but no one answered the door. Near Johnia's room, they found the murder weapon, a kitchen knife owned by Jason Amami. The attacker used the knife with such force that it was bent and damaged. Police also found blood stains near the back door and on the stairs leading to the street. Since Jason Amami and Johnia had left through the front door, detectives believe the killer escaped through the back door. In Jason Amami's room, they found another clue, partial footprints that the attacker may have left while stalking and attacking Jason Amami. Because of the brutality of Johnia's death, police suspected a personal motive behind the crime. Initially, detectives investigated Johnia's boyfriend, even though he lived about 1,000 miles away in Knoxville. However, all of his friends and family said that Johnia and her boyfriend had a wonderful relationship and that he had no reason to commit such a brutal act. He learned of Johnia's death when her mother called at 10 a.m. to tell him. He said he fainted when he heard the news and it took him a long time to regain consciousness. Unable to do anything, he asked his neighbors to help him book a plane ticket and prepare his luggage. Investigators looked closely at Jason White's alibi and realized that he could not have made it to Knoxville and back in the morning by himself. So they eliminated him as a suspect and turned their attention to Johnia's neighbor. This neighbor did not have a solid alibi and had been in the apartment with Johnia, raising suspicions that he could be the culprit. Johnia's friends and family also suspected this neighbor. Some believed that he could be the killer, while others accused him of fleeing the apartment, leaving Johnia behind. The suspicions were so deep that the victim's parents did not even want him to attend her funeral. However, after Jason Amami was discharged from the hospital, investigators began questioning him. He stuck to his original story. He heard screaming, saw a strange man, and was attacked by him. After fighting off the attacker, Jason Amami ran to the front door and onto the street, seeking help from neighbors. He believed that Johnia had also escaped from the apartment because he could not hear her screams. However, police had doubts about Jason Amami's story. What initially raised suspicions about Jason Amami were his injuries. 7 of the 8 were superficial, and the last wound to his right arm could have been self-defense or the result of an attack. Additionally, investigators found no signs of forced entry into the apartment, suggesting that the perpetrator may have been someone Johnia knew. Jason Amami claimed that he had taken out the trash through the back door that night but did not remember locking it. Detectives continued to press him, paying close attention to the door he used to exit the apartment onto the street. Jason Amami insisted that he had exited through the front door, but police suspected that he might be lying. If Jason Amami had indeed left through the front door, that would not have explained the presence of bloodstains near the back door, further raising suspicions against him. Police accused Jason Amami of using and selling illegal drugs, and of being aggressive when he could not satisfy his addiction. However, he denied all of these allegations. After hours of questioning at the police station, detectives suggested that Jason Amami take a polygraph test. Jason Amami agreed to take the test. The results showed that he gave false answers, which made detectives even more suspicious of him. However, detectives were still unable to charge him with murder due to a lack of concrete evidence. They had to wait for lab experts to complete testing on some of the evidence found in the apartment. They then discovered some key evidence, including 3 DNA samples on the murder knife, samples from Johnia, Jason Amami, and an unidentified man. The unidentified man's DNA was also found in Johnia's room, on the back door handle, and on the stairs the criminal used to escape to the street. They also found a fingerprint on the handle of the knife, but it did not match Jason Amami's fingerprint. These discoveries led the police to suspect that someone else had been in the apartment that night. However, when they ran the DNA sample against existing databases, they found no match. This complicated the case further, and detectives had to continue investigating to find the real killer. Investigators have ruled out Jason Amami as a suspect, but the public remains uncertain about his role in the incident. They believe that Jason Amami abandoned his friend and ran away instead of protecting her. However, it is worth noting that after the accident, Jason Amami began to suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. A key finding was later revealed: the polygraph operator had misinterpreted the test results, and there was no indication that Jason Amami was lying. Additionally, there was no concrete evidence that Jason Amami was involved with illegal substances. They eventually concluded that this was used as leverage to frame him. More importantly, however, doctors initially underestimated the severity of Jason Amami's injuries. In fact, he had suffered severe damage to his lungs and neck, with little hope of a full recovery. Due to inaccurate information reported about Jason Amami's health, the insurance company only covered 25% of his medical expenses, leaving Jason Amami facing serious financial hardship. After eliminating Jason as a suspect, police began questioning him as a witness. Based on Jason's testimony, they attempted to create a rough description of the attacker. However, this was made more difficult by the fact that Jason could not see the attacker's face clearly. The apartment was too dark and the attacker lunged at him as soon as he entered the room. Investigators also discovered several suspicious items in the room, including a hat, a record player, and a stereo near the back stairs. At first, they thought these items might belong to Johnia or Jason, but Jason denied owning them. This led them to suspect that these items might have been left behind by the killer. Police shared a rough sketch of the suspect with the media, and they subsequently received hundreds of calls from the public. Many people reported individuals who matched the sketch, prompting detectives to pursue each of these leads. One of the prominent clues led investigators to a group of teenagers who had broken into homes with the intention of burglarizing. One member of the group, a 19-year-old named Michael, matched the sketch of the suspect. The police began searching for Michael, but this was not easy because he was wanted for burglary. 2 police units joined the search for him, and they eventually found Michael. When interrogating Michael, investigators immediately noticed his shoes, which had a pattern similar to the footprints left by the killer. They collected Michael's DNA and fingerprints and sent them to experts for analysis. During the interrogation, Michael revealed a surprising piece of information. He and a friend had entered Johnia's apartment that night. According to Michael, they planned to rob, but his friend attacked Johnia with a knife. However, detectives soon discovered inconsistencies in Michael's story. The details he provided did not match the actual events, and there was no evidence of 2 strangers at the crime scene. Michael's DNA and fingerprints also did not match the evidence at the scene. Michael's shoes also did not match the tread pattern in Jason's room. Investigators concluded that Michael had made up the story. This is not uncommon, as some people may falsely confess to crimes in order to seek attention or reward. Michael's motives remained unclear, but his story was completely untrue. Police subsequently interviewed more than 1,000 potential suspects and collected about 400 DNA samples, but none of them matched the evidence at the scene. Early in the murder investigation, authorities offered a reward for information leading to a solution to the case. The reward grew each month, and by December 2005, it had reached $60,000. The governor then added another $20,000 to bring the case to the attention of the public. Despite many clues, all were dead ends, and the case remained unsolved for many years. In 2007, Johnia's parents decided to take matters into their own hands by looking into changes in state law. They noticed that the killer's fingerprints and DNA did not appear in any databases, which raised suspicions about his brutality. They assumed that the killer had a criminal record, so they investigated Tennessee law. Through their investigation, they discovered that, according to Tennessee law, fingerprints and DNA samples could only be collected from convicted criminals. So Johnia's parents expressed their desire to change this law. They played a key role in drafting a new law that required fingerprints and DNA samples to be collected from all people arrested for violent crimes. After gaining support from the government, the law was passed in May 2007. 2 months later, a breakthrough occurred. Police arrested 22-year-old Taylor Lee Olsen for violating the terms of his probation. Olsen had a criminal record, including theft, check forgery, and auto theft, and had been arrested several times. Surprisingly, however, police had never collected his fingerprints or DNA. Olsen lived with his girlfriend and newborn daughter, but he continued to commit crimes. 5 months earlier, police had begun investigating Olsen for his suspected involvement in the murder of Johnia. However, they had not been able to analyze his DNA at the time. But after Olsen was arrested for violating his probation, police decided to question him about the details of the Johnia case. Olsen eventually confessed to his role in the murder and voluntarily provided a DNA sample. The DNA test showed that Olsen's sample matched the one found in the victim's apartment. Additionally, Olsen's fingerprints matched the fingerprints on the murder weapon. Olsen claimed that he intended to steal Johnia's car that night and entered the apartment through the back door to look for the keys. When he entered Johnia's room, she woke up and began screaming. In a panic, Olsen grabbed a kitchen knife and attacked her multiple times. Olsen insisted that he had no intention of killing anyone and that the incident was an unfortunate accident. Investigators were suspicious of some of the details and suspected that Taylor had planned to kill Johnia in advance. They believed that he may have been following Johnia for some time, which was supported by Johnia's friends reporting that someone was following her in a car at the time. Although there was no concrete evidence to prove this became more credible after Olsen was arrested. When Olsen's trial was scheduled to begin in mid-2008, he hired an attorney. His attorney advised him to withdraw his original confession, and Olsen gave a new account to investigators. According to this new account, Olsen claimed that he had entered Johnia's apartment with his friend, Noah Cox. When Olsen entered Johnia's room to get his car keys, Johnia allegedly woke up, grabbed a knife, and stabbed Olsen multiple times. Olsen then fled through the back door while his friend entered Johnia's room, disarmed Johnia, and killed her. Taylor Olsen's new story raised suspicions among police. They found no fingerprints or DNA of others at the crime scene, leading them to believe that no one else was involved. Detectives waited for the trial to begin, but it never did. On March 28, 2008, Taylor Olsen committed suicide in his jail cell. Along with him, detectives found several suicide notes addressed to his family, Johnia's relatives, and the police. In the letter to detectives, he accused his friend Noah Cox of being the real culprit and apologized to Johnia's family and his family. However, detectives still believed that Olsen was responsible for the murders. They questioned Noah several times but found no evidence implicating him. Johnia's parents were also skeptical of Olsen's final confession. They felt that if Olsen was truly innocent, he would not have committed suicide. Olsen had consistently maintained that he had entered the apartment alone for months after his initial confession. His sudden change in story to blame his friend raised further suspicions. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Shanynthia Gardner. Shanynthia Gardner was born in Memphis, Tennessee, in the late 1980s. Shaninthia's childhood was relatively ordinary. She was a beautiful, slender, curly-haired brunette with a talent for music and a creative spirit. She had a gift for composing songs and singing, which earned her local recognition and fame. Her love for music was just one of her passions. In addition to singing, Shanynthia enjoyed fashion and photography. She was a natural in front of the camera and had an artistic eye for capturing everyday moments. Despite her many creative pursuits, Shanynthia was also devoted to charity and her faith. She regularly attended church and prioritized her family's needs. Her life seemed to be on a promising path, filled with potential and possibilities. Shanynthia was 14 years old when she met Dur Clayton through mutual friends. They quickly discovered common interests and became friends. As they grew older and graduated from high school, their friendship evolved into a romantic relationship. They were perceived as a serious and stable young couple, but had some minor run-ins with the law, including traffic violations and disorderly conduct. In 2008, Dur faced a serious accusation of assaulting a woman, although it was allegedly unintentional. Fortunately for him, the charges were eventually dropped. That same year, Shanynthia and Dur began living together, and they had a son. Shanynthia took on a caring motherly role not only to their son but also to Dur's 2 children from a previous relationship. Sonia Clayton, Dur's mother, considered Shanynthia a part of their family, not just she her son loved. Shaninthia's devotion to her children made her special in Sonia's eyes. Although the relationship between Shanynthia and Dur was short-lived, they maintained some contact after the breakup. In Sonia's opinion, Shanynthia remained a good partner and caring mother to Dur. Shaninthia's marriage to Martin Gardner marked a new chapter in her life. He brought joy and stability, and she won him over with her kindness and love for children. To Martin, Shanynthia embodied feminine tenderness and wisdom. Shanynthia and Martin's life together progressed quickly. In September 2013, they moved into an apartment in southeast Shelby County and started their life together. After their wedding, they welcomed their first child, Telone. The following year, Saya was born, and soon after, 2 more girls, Savi and Yazzie, joined the family. In total, Martin and Shanynthia had 4 children together, in addition to Shaninthia's child from a previous relationship. For the young mom, her children were always the top priority. She enjoyed her part-time work at the Children's Hospital and was also actively involved in a center that raised funds to support children in need. Helping others was her true calling, and she dedicated her life to it with gratitude. Friday, July 1st, 2016, began like any other ordinary day. At around noon, Shanynthia was speaking with her husband, Martin, over the phone. Her voice remained calm, as it typically was. She told her husband she was going to watch a movie with the kids, giving no indication that anything was amiss on this ordinary day. However, during a quiet conversation between the spouses, a sudden and inexplicable madness took hold of Shanynthia. She grabbed a kitchen knife and entered the living room, where she attacked her 6-month-old daughter, Yazzie. The defenseless baby was caught off guard and her life was brutally cut short by the person she trusted most. The eldest child, at just 7 years old, witnessed this horrific scene unfold before his eyes, unable to fully comprehend the tragedy. Panicked and desperate, he fled the house. Shanynthia pursued him, still armed with the knife, intent on continuing her rampage. She chased after Dur, but his terrified screams caught the attention of the neighbors. A couple of neighbors rushed outside after hearing screams and were met with a horrific scene that would haunt them. Shanynthia stopped attacking Dur when she realized she was being watched. However, the horror was far from over. Chania went back inside the house, where her children, Savi and Telone, were waiting. In a state of distress, she went upstairs to the bedroom where the younger children were, marking the end of their innocent lives. The witnesses quickly called emergency services, requesting help for Dur and his siblings. At that moment, no one could have predicted the tragic outcome that awaited the quiet neighborhood. When the sheriff's personnel arrived, they were confronted with a gruesome scene. Inside the house, they found 4 lifeless children, covered in blood. The sight was shocking. Shanynthia calmly called her husband, Martin, and confessed to killing their children. The house was now filled with blood and horror. The investigators had obtained a bloody knife. Chaplains and specialists were called in to provide support to Dur, who had endured unimaginable trauma and required immediate attention. The sheriff's department launched a major operation, cordoning off the apartment complex, including the golf area and country club. Shanynthia was taken into custody without bail, and her trial was swiftly scheduled for July 5th. Despite the heinous nature of her crimes, Shanynthia was still a mother and partner, someone who had once nurtured love, care, and joy. A friend of Shanynthia, Michelle Jaiman, actively defended Shanynthia on social media, countering the unjust accusations and emphasizing a key factor: postpartum depression. The case sparked discussions, with Dr. Joel Rissman, a psychiatrist at the University of Tennessee Medical Center, noting that mothers killing their children is rare and often linked to mental health problems. Dr. Rissman also highlighted the state's insufficient mental health funding, which frequently leaves families without vital support. Dr. Diane Barnes, a specialist in psychology and postpartum health, clarified the distinction between postpartum depression and postpartum psychosis. She emphasized that these are 2 separate conditions with distinct symptoms. Although the exact nature of Shaninthia's condition required further examination, Dr. Barnes expressed skepticism that a woman experiencing postpartum depression would commit such acts, instead suggesting psychosis as a more plausible explanation. Dur's father did not believe Shanynthia was guilty. Although he was not his son's guardian, he was able to visit him after his relationship with Shanynthia ended, but this stopped in November 2014. He noticed Shanynthia becoming more radical and controlling. His attempts to contact his son were unsuccessful, and he was excluded from his life. Those close to Shanynthia noticed a significant change in her. She began experiencing discomfort, which turned into anxiety, paranoia, and panic attacks. Her behavior became unpredictable, and some suspected postpartum depression. This was a shock, as Shanynthia was seen as strong and dependable. She had always been in control, but now seemed to be struggling. Shaninthia's sudden change in behavior in March 2015 left many people baffled. At first, her friends and family couldn't understand what was happening. One day, she left work early, picked up her children, and drove them down an unfamiliar road, away from their home. Her husband, Martin, thought she was just going for a walk in a park, which was a normal part of her daily routine, so he wasn't immediately concerned. However, as the hours went by, Shanynthia never came home, which worried Martin greatly. He decided to alert the authorities to look out for his wife, who was driving with their 5 children. Shanynthia drove over 74 miles east, from Memphis to Corinth, but it's unclear why she chose that destination, as she didn't know anyone there. She was later found in the emergency room of St. Francis Hospital, but the police didn't explain how she ended up there. Shanynthia had superficial cuts on her neck and one wrist. If she had attempted to harm herself, her children were the only witnesses, but they were too young to understand what was happening. Eventually, the authorities brought Shanynthia home. However, her behavior became even more unusual after that. She told Martin that someone was threatening her and their family, which shocked him, as she provided no details about the supposed threat or who was behind it. There had been no previous incidents of this kind. When Shanynthia was with family and friends, she began complaining about her job and workload, claiming it made her feel terrible. She soon started saying that some co-workers wanted to harm her. Despite these strange claims, Shanynthia showed no signs of being violent or abusive towards her children or others. The investigation into Shanynthia Gardner's case proved to be a challenging process. Craig Morton, her defense attorney, opted not to discuss the case with the media in its initial stages, deeming it premature for such comments. During the court hearing on July 5, 2016, Shanynthia remained silent, appearing via video link. Despite being questioned by Judge Lambert, she refrained from speaking. Following the trial, Shanynthia was transferred to the Mental Health Institute. Her relatives attended the courthouse but chose not to speak with reporters. Meanwhile, Morton's attorney and prosecutor Jennifer Nichols intended to file a motion to preserve evidence, including information obtained from social media. January 2017 saw Shanynthia formally charged with 4 counts: aggravated child abuse, aggravated murder with a deadly weapon, another count of aggravated child abuse, and child neglect. The investigation into the mysterious and gruesome events continued, leaving the community seeking justice and answers to numerous questions. During the hearing, loved ones of Shanynthia testified about the events of that fateful day. Sonia, Martin's mother, was shocked to learn of the tragedy and rushed to the scene to find her grandson, Dur. Initially, she thought something supernatural was involved, but as the shock wore off, she considered possible motives. Sonia wondered if their potential divorce and fear of caring for 5 children alone might have driven Shanynthia to commit the horrific act. The trial was significantly delayed due to Shaninthia's multiple psychiatric evaluations. However, in 2021, the non-jury trial finally commenced. The defense centered its strategy around Shaninthia's mental illness, while the prosecution acknowledged her condition but argued that she could distinguish right from wrong and understood the illegality of her actions. In December 2021, Judge James of the Shelby County Criminal Court rejected the defense's argument, and Shanynthia Gardner was found guilty of all charges. 2 months later, Shanynthia, 34, appeared in court for sentencing, accompanied by her husband Martin. Judge James sentenced her to life in prison for each murder count, plus 15 years for each count of child abuse and neglect. Shanynthia can apply for parole only after serving 51 years. Considering the 5 years she spent in prison before sentencing, she will be eligible for parole in approximately 46 years, at the age of 80. After the sentencing, the prosecutor expressed agreement with the decision, citing that it aligned with their goal of achieving justice for Martin and his children. Upon hearing the verdict, Martin felt a sense of relief knowing that Shanynthia would no longer be able to harm any more children. An evening vigil was held at the apartment complex where the family lived, attended by neighbors, family members, and law enforcement officers. The gathering was a tribute to the innocent victims, with attendees holding red and white candles and offering prayers for the departed souls. The Reverend Pastor of the Baptist Church emphasized that the vigil marked the beginning of the community's healing process. He noted that those present were united in their desire to support the surviving baby and his father during this challenging time. rdered did not attend the memorial ceremony, with his grandmother Sonia explaining to the media that he was too consumed by anger to participate. The president and CEO of the Children's Hospital where Shanynthia worked extended condolences on behalf of the hospital staff. Martin's colleagues created a social media account to support him with the funeral arrangements for his 4 children. At the ceremony, Martin displayed remarkable strength and dignity in his speech as he shared a few words about his children and family. He concluded by emphasizing that his home was once filled with happiness when his children and Shanynthia were present, and that he would always cherish this memory. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sarah Stern. Sarah Elizabeth Sarah was born on March 24, 1997, in Neptune City, New Jersey, to Michael and Susan Sarah. As their only child, Sarah received all the love and attention from her parents, who had been unable to have more children due to health issues. Sarah grew up to be a lively, cheerful, and outgoing child. She was involved in various activities, including school theater, photography, drawing, swimming, and softball. Her passion was art, and she aspired to become an artist or designer. After graduating from high school, Sarah enrolled in a local college to pursue her dream. Tragedy struck in the autumn of 2013 when Sarah's mother, Susan, passed away after a long battle with cancer. Despite periods of remission, the disease ultimately took its toll. This devastating loss was a tremendous shock to the family, particularly for Sarah, who was extremely close to her mother. After a period of struggling with depression, Sarah began to support her ailing father and care for their beloved dog, Buddy. As time passed, her life started to improve, and she set goals for the future. Upon graduating from college, Sarah planned to apply to a prestigious university in New York. Before pursuing further education, she hoped to travel the world, with a particular interest in visiting Canada and possibly even living there for a while. Her father, Michael Sarah, frequently traveled out of state for work, often for weeks at a time. However, he never worried about leaving Sarah alone, as she was a grown and independent young woman, and their town was considered safe. But on the night of December 3, 2016, around 2:30 a.m., an unsettling incident occurred. A concerned citizen reported an abandoned vehicle on the Belmar Bridge along Highway 35, prompting the police to become involved. The area was usually deserted at night, which made the lone, empty vehicle stand out. A taxi driver, who was taking a shortcut home across the old bridge on the outskirts, noticed the car parked on the side of the road. He stopped to see if anyone needed assistance, but found the vehicle empty with no one around. Concerned that the driver might have jumped into the water below, a tragic occurrence that had happened before in this spot. The taxi driver called the police. Police officers responding to the scene found the car's keys in the ignition and no signs of blood or struggle, leading them to initially believe that the owner may have intentionally left the car on the bridge to jump into the river. To investigate further, they checked the car's ownership and discovered it belonged to 85-year-old Lily Sarah, who lived in a nearby town. When officers visited Lily's home, they found her alive and well. She explained that she hadn't driven the car in years due to poor eyesight, and her 19-year-old granddaughter, Sarah, was the frequent driver. Lily tried to contact Sarah but was unable to reach her because her phone was turned off. She then provided the officers with her son's address, where Sarah lived, and informed them that Sarah was likely alone, as her father was out of town for work and wouldn't return until the following week. Sarah was nowhere to be found at her home. Although the back door was open, an initial search of the house didn't turn up any signs of foul play. However, they did find the family dog locked in one of the bedrooms, whining. Despite the open back door, there were no signs of disarray or struggle, and no evidence of an intruder. As the news of her disappearance spread, Sarah's father, Michael, rushed back home on the next available flight. Upon his arrival, he confirmed that everything was still in its place and nothing was missing. Notably, all of Sarah's personal belongings, including her passport, driver's license, and mobile phone, were still at the house. The police shared their initial concerns with Michael, suggesting that Sarah might have gone to the nearby bridge with intentions to harm herself. They asked if he had noticed any warning signs of suicidal tendencies or self-harm. Michael revealed that Sarah had struggled with depression after her mother's passing, but had made a full recovery with the help of loved ones and her studies. In fact, Sarah had big plans for her future, aspiring to become a designer and travel the world. To piece together what happened, the police needed to know who Sarah had contact with on the day she vanished, what conversations she had, and who saw her last. The first witnesses to come forward revealed that Sarah had spent most of December 2nd with her childhood friend, Liam McAtasney. As the last person to see her, Liam was a crucial part of the investigation. The police quickly decided to speak with him to gather more information and reconstruct the events of that day. When the police arrived at the McAtasney residence, they met with Liam's mother, who told them that her son was sleeping after a night shift. The officers asked her to wake Liam, who seemed confused about the situation. Once he was informed about Sarah's disappearance, Liam confirmed that they had spent the previous day together and agreed to go to the police station to give a statement. Liam shared that he and Sarah had attended college classes together that morning, but they decided to skip the last 2 lectures and go to her place to unwind instead. At her house, they played video games, chatted about their plans, and socialized. They briefly left her house twice to pick up food and visit a local supermarket. Liam left Sarah's house around 7 p.m. to go to his night shift job and did not see her again. Liam was also asked if Sarah had been struggling with any mental health issues. He explained that she had been battling deep depression since her mother passed away. He shared that Sarah often felt hopeless, wanting to escape or end her life, but he did not think that this meant she was planning to harm herself. He noted that she also struggled to connect with her father, leading to additional emotional strain. Liam considered it possible that Sarah's emotional state may have contributed to her disappearance. However, it was also clear that Sarah was planning a trip to Canada around that time and had recently exchanged money in preparation for her travels. Liam's testimony gained credibility when Canadian dollars were found in her bedside table drawer, though the amount was relatively insignificant. Preston Taylor, a close friend from high school, corroborated Liam's story. Preston mentioned that Sarah had struggled with depression, leading him to wonder if she had fled to Canada or taken her own life by jumping off a bridge. His emotional testimony underscored the strong bond he shared with Sarah. Despite these accounts, investigators soon ruled out the possibility of Sarah fleeing the country due to the absence of her passport. As a result, the search focused on the more distressing possibility of her having jumped to her death. A comprehensive search operation was launched along the river, involving divers, specialized equipment, and hundreds of volunteers, including police. However, strong currents posed a challenge, potentially carrying her remains or personal belongings far from the bridge, and thorough searches of both riverbanks were necessary to try to find any signs of Sarah. Among the volunteers searching for Sarah were her friends Liam and Preston. Despite their efforts, the search yielded nothing, prompting law enforcement to re-question those closest to Sarah. It was during this process that discrepancies in their accounts began to emerge. Sarah's friends and classmates described her as a happy and carefree person, with no signs of depression or problems with her father, whom she often spoke about affectionately. However, Liam and Preston's behavior after Sarah's disappearance raised eyebrows. They initially acted as if they had lost a loved one, gaining sympathy from many. But over time, their behavior seemed increasingly insincere, as if they were performing for an audience. The fact that Liam and Preston had only recently become close, about a month before Sarah's disappearance, raised suspicions and led the police to re-question them. Liam was visibly shaken when he was brought in for further questioning. The investigator asked him about his relationship with Sarah and Preston, and Liam explained that the three of them had grown up together on the same street and attended the same school. They were extremely close, sharing their deepest secrets and dreams with each other. Preston had even taken Sarah to prom, but they had never been romantically involved. Liam clarified that his relationship with Sarah was more than just friendship; he considered her like a sister. They had even listed each other as siblings on social media. Sarah had confided in Liam about her family, telling him that her mother had left her a significant amount of money in a safety deposit box at the bank. Sarah didn't trust her father, who claimed a right to the money, so she planned to retrieve it soon and move to Canada. However, when the investigator shared this information with Michael, Sarah's father, he provided a conflicting account. According to Michael, his wife had been saving money for Sarah's future since her birth, setting aside funds for education, a wedding, or a down payment on a house. The money had been stored at home in a shoe box, containing old and worn-out bills, but no one had thought much of it at the time. After Sarah's mother passed away, her father gave her a large sum of money, which he advised her to put in the bank. Sarah took his advice, dividing the money between her checking account for everyday expenses and a safe deposit box for the rest. She intended to use the money for graduate school and travel. Michael claimed he wasn't interested in the money for himself. When investigators discovered that Sarah had access to a significant amount of money, they began to suspect that her disappearance might be related to her finances. They decided to look into her financial transactions, including her bank account and safe deposit box. Their investigation revealed that Sarah had withdrawn a large amount of cash from an ATM just a few days before she disappeared, and had also accessed her safe deposit box at the bank around the same time. The detectives were in for another surprise when they reviewed the bank surveillance footage, which showed that Sarah was not alone when she visited the bank on December 1st. Liam was with her, raising questions about why he hadn't mentioned this earlier. When asked about it, Liam explained that Sarah had confided in him about her banking activities and had asked for his accompaniment because she was nervous about carrying a large sum of cash. Liam's hesitation was evident, but his story seemed plausible, and his demeanor appeared genuine. Further investigation led to the discovery of a security camera in a neighboring house that had captured footage of the street and Sarah's yard. The footage confirmed that Liam had stayed at Sarah's house until 7 p.m., then left for work and didn't return. Meanwhile, the silver sedan was seen leaving the garage around 11 p.m. This new information added a chilling twist to the already disturbing case. In a surprising turn of events, an acquaintance of Sarah's named Anthony walked into the police station about a month after her disappearance. Unaware of the recent events, Anthony had been out of town for several weeks. He shared a peculiar story that sent shockwaves through the investigation. It turned out that Anthony had gone to school with Sarah, Liam, and Preston, and after graduation, he had pursued a passion for filmmaking, keeping in touch only with Liam, who also shared his interest in cinema. Anthony remembered that about a month and a half before Sarah disappeared, Liam visited him and they spent an evening brainstorming ideas for a horror movie aimed at teenagers. Liam came up with a plot about a girl who shares a secret about a large sum of money with her friend, who then gains her trust and kills her, dumping her body in a river. Anthony thought the idea was good and they even wrote a few pages of the script. After that, Anthony moved on to another project and forgot about the story. He then left town to work on a film as a camera assistant. When he returned, Liam unexpectedly called him and asked if the police had contacted Anthony. Anthony was surprised and had not heard that Sarah was missing, so he decided to go to the police. After hearing a new witness's testimony, the police asked Anthony to try to get Liam to confess by drawing him into a conversation. Anthony agreed and a plan was set in motion. He would invite Liam to work on a project that required renting expensive camera equipment, which they would pretend they couldn't afford. Liam had ambitions of being in a movie, so the police thought he would likely jump at the chance to make his dream a reality, especially if it meant using the money he had taken from Sarah. They decided to test him by setting up a sting operation. Anthony, a friend of Liam's, was asked to pretend to have connections in the film industry and offer him a deal. Anthony met with Liam and suggested they discuss the details in person. Unbeknownst to Liam, a hidden camera had been installed in Anthony's car to capture any incriminating evidence. When Liam got into the car, he looked around nervously, as if he suspected something was off. He then handed Anthony an envelope containing $2,000 in cash and asked if it was enough to rent the equipment they would need for the movie. Anthony agreed, and then asked Liam where he had gotten the old bills. Liam hesitated before admitting that the money belonged to Sarah, and that he and his friend Preston had taken it from her house because, in his words, the dead don't need it. Although Liam didn't provide any further details, his admission was enough for the police to arrest him and his friend Preston on suspicion of a crime. Preston, Liam's accomplice, quickly began cooperating with the authorities and struck a deal with the prosecution. He told them that he hadn't directly participated in the crime, but had helped Liam cover his tracks and get rid of Sarah's body. According to Preston, Liam started plotting to take Sarah's money as soon as he found out about it. Sarah had kept her inheritance a secret, even from her closest friend, for a long time. However, when she began making serious plans for a trip to Canada, Liam asked her how she intended to pay for it, and she revealed that she had inherited a sum of money from her mother. Liam then persuaded her that it would be safer to store the money in a home safe rather than a bank vault, and he urged her to withdraw the cash. Liam, determined to carry out his plan, waited for the perfect opportunity while Sarah's father was away on a business trip. He enlisted the help of his friend Preston, promising him $25,000 in exchange for his assistance. Liam had Sarah withdraw a large sum of money from the ATM, but didn't check the exact amount. They spent the next day together, waiting for the right moment to strike. When the time came, Liam separated Sarah from her dog by locking it in another room, then approached Sarah from behind and attempted to strangle her. However, the crime proved more difficult than Liam anticipated. Sarah, being physically strong and athletic, resisted fiercely, resulting in an intense struggle until she eventually lost consciousness. But despite his best efforts, Liam was unable to determine whether she had truly succumbed. Sarah continued to show signs of life, leaving Liam to prolong his efforts to ensure her demise. This took nearly 30 minutes. Only when Liam was certain Sarah was dead did he leave her house, going about his normal routine by heading to work. He then had Preston follow up on his original instructions, no doubt aiming to ensure their sinister act would go unnoticed. Liam McAtasney snuck into Sarah's house through the back door, avoiding the camera's view, and dragged the body to the garage. He then cleaned up the room to remove any evidence. A couple of hours later, he returned to the house, took a small safe from Sarah's room, and placed the body in the car. Liam drove away carefully to avoid being caught on the neighbor's camera. He met Preston at a bridge, where they transferred the body to Preston's car and then disposed of it in a nearby river. After disposing of the body, they cleaned the car and drove back to Liam's house to divide the stolen money. However, they were disappointed to find only $110,000 in the safe. They decided to be cautious and not spend the old bills immediately to avoid raising suspicion. Preston buried the safe in a local park, and they only spent the money Sarah had withdrawn from her account. During the trial, Preston confessed to the crime, but Liam denied any involvement and tried to shift the blame to his friend. Liam's lawyer also claimed his client was innocent, suggesting that Preston acted alone. The case was complicated by the fact that Sarah's body was never found. When police searched Liam's house, they found a small key that fit the buried safe, which was identified by Preston as evidence of Liam's guilt. The trial of Liam McAtasney lasted over 2 years. Despite the fact that Sarah Stern's body was never found, the evidence presented in court proved McAtasney's guilt. This evidence included a script he had written months before the crime, a key to a safe found in his home, incriminating statements he made in the car, and old bills he had given to someone. Furthermore, fingerprints belonging to Liam and his accomplice, Preston Taylor, were found inside the safe. A co-worker of Liam's also testified that he had been absent from work for a few hours on the night of the crime and had asked someone to cover for him. As a result of the trial, Liam was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Preston, who had not directly participated in the crime, received an 18-year sentence for obstructing justice and hindering the investigation. Preston will be eligible for parole in 15 years. Unfortunately, Sarah Stern's body has still not been found. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Tina Watson. Tina Watson, 26, was hesitant to share her engagement news with her parents. This was her third attempt at marriage, after her previous relationships with Scott McCulloch and Stan Marks ended. She met Gabe Watson at a Christmas Eve party and they developed a relationship after both had gone through breakups. 2 years later, Gabe proposed to Tina, who agreed to marry him if her parents gave their blessing. To win them over, Gabe planned a romantic dinner on Valentine's Day, but rescheduled for February 15th when Tina's father was available. During the dinner, Gabe made a bold announcement that he planned to spend the rest of his life with Tina. Her father then asked the seemingly straightforward question, "Gabe, do you love Tina?" However, Gabe was caught off guard and stuttered, failing to provide a clear answer. Her father wrote off Gabe's awkwardness as mere nervousness in front of strangers. The father then turned to Tina and asked the same question, but she sidestepped it. Instead, she expressed her fear of being alone at the age of 26. After a moment of contemplation, her father gave the young couple his blessing. As the wedding preparations were underway, Gabe and Tina clearly had different ideas. While Tina was busy thinking about the wedding dress, the guest list, and the entire ceremony, Gabe was focused on planning their honeymoon. He did not consider Tina's preferences for their vacation, as he had already made up his mind. Gabe had decided that they would go to the Great Barrier Reef in Australia and go scuba diving, without consulting Tina about it. Gabe and Tina had planned to explore the sunken ship, the Townsville Titanic, which sank in 1911. However, Tina was not a skilled diver, unlike Gabe, who was an experienced scuba diver with over 50 dives under his belt. He was even completing a rescue diving course. Gabe had occasionally taken Tina scuba diving in a pool, but only in calm waters and under the supervision of lifeguards. Gabe made the decision to have Tina learn to scuba dive before the honeymoon or at home. He was serious about it, and Tina felt she had no choice but to comply. Gabe even went so far as to borrow money to buy Tina her own scuba gear and pay for lessons. However, Tina's first instructor was not impressed with her skills and warned Gabe that she was not fit for open ocean diving. Gabe angrily interrupted the dive instructor, accusing him of not explaining the lesson clearly. As a result, the second instructor promptly refunded Tina for the unfinished class, and on October 11th, Tina and Gabe were married and flew to Australia just 2 days later for a lavish honeymoon paid for with a $10,000 wedding gift. Gabe's honeymoon with Tina included spending time in Sydney, where they walked around the city, visited the aquarium, and the zoo. At first, Tina was excited, but as their trip to the Great Barrier Reef approached, she became increasingly saddened. On October 21st, they flew to Townsville and in the evening boarded a boat to the Great Barrier Reef, a dream destination for many divers. According to employees at the diving company, they didn't appear to be experienced divers. Even Gabe, who had completed diving courses and had some experience, seemed unsure of how to use the equipment, as if he had never seen it before. Despite this, Gabe assisted Tina in passing her pre-dive exam, a test that is usually administered individually. Additionally, when the instructor offered to help Tina underwater, she declined the offer. The dive log noted the presence of a strong current on that day, a crucial detail that should not be overlooked. Upon arrival, Gabe assisted his wife in organizing their equipment, which they had purchased in the US, and prepared to rent scuba tanks. Gabe chose an 11-liter tank for himself, while his wife used an 8.5-liter tank, which was unusually small for the location and potentially hazardous given her limited diving experience. Their initial attempt to dive to the Townsville Titanic was unsuccessful. Tina required a weight belt to descend, and Gabe initially struggled to operate the underwater computer, which monitors the safe rate of descent and ascent, as well as the oxygen levels in the cylinders. After returning to the boat to regroup, Gabe was able to use the computer, and they made a second attempt. The wreck lay at a depth of 49 feet, and Tina made the first descent, with Gabe following close behind. At first, everything was fine, but then Tina suddenly stopped, waved at me, and signaled she wanted to ascend. I recognized this as a panic response, which she had shown before. We were halfway up the dive at this point, so I decided to stay with her at the same depth to help her calm down and get used to the pressure. However, Tina continued to breathe rapidly and deeply, which was unsafe. Gabe realized she was sinking, and Gabe tried to grab her waist to hold her in place. But she swung her arms violently, knocking Gabe's mask off his face. While Gabe was putting his mask back on, Tina quickly moved away from Gabe. Gabe tried to swim after her, but he couldn't catch up. Gabe then decided to return to the surface to get help from the lifeguards. On his way to the surface, Gabe encountered another diver who appeared unconcerned and did not respond to Gabe's distress signals. There were 2 Asian divers with Gabe at the time, but neither confirmed Gabe's claim that he had attempted to help his wife. A subsequent police investigation, including analysis of underwater computer data, revealed that Gabe had initially attempted to swim to his struggling wife, but quickly abandoned the attempt, despite the relative lack of urgency to surface. Gabe followed standard procedure, ascending gradually and pausing at predetermined depth levels. However, the other divers later stated to the police that, in their opinion, Gabe had the opportunity to save his wife but chose not to do so. Furthermore, this incident occurred at the beginning of the dive, so Gabe had sufficient oxygen in his tanks to have potentially reached the ocean floor and returned to the surface without compromising his own safety. The rescuers quickly sprang into action after locating Tina, but unfortunately, it was too late. Tina found lying on her back at 82 feet. Tina received 40 minutes of artificial respiration on the yacht's deck, but these efforts were unsuccessful. Gabe kept his distance from his wife during the incident, standing off to the side and sniffing his nose, according to witnesses. However, other passengers reported that he was friendly and even played cards with them on the way to the shore. Gabe denied this in court. The autopsy results for Tina were not entirely clear-cut. While there were no obvious signs of a violent death, there were bruises on her neck and blood in her nostrils, which could be attributed to the 82-degree depth at which her body was found. There was no alcohol in her system, but high levels of ibuprofen and paracetamol were detected, which are commonly used to treat seasickness. A small amount of fluid was also found in her lungs. The report concluded that Tina died from drowning, but it's possible that she drowned after already being deprived of oxygen. An investigation by the Australian Water Police found no malfunctions with Tina's diving gear. It would have been easy for the police to dismiss the incident as a tragic accident. A novice diver ignored safety procedures and lost his life, a sad occurrence. However, several suspicious aspects of the case made it difficult to close the case. The autopsy results were inconclusive, and the dive team reported that the deceased's husband, Gabe, had been behaving strangely, inconsistent with the usual grief response of a husband who had just lost his wife. These conflicts dragged on as the investigation progressed, and Gabe realized that the detectives were watching him very closely. Furthermore, Tina's parents were unwilling to accept that the incident was an accident and wanted to see their son-in-law held accountable for failing to help her. During the initial interview, police observed Gabe in a state of shock, exhibiting erratic behavior, including crying, laughing, and jerking around. Gabe repeatedly asked to call his father, complaining of an earache and begging him to inform Tina's parents of this. Gabe was released late at night and went to the company's yacht to request a place to stay for the night. He explained that the trip was supposed to last 2 days, but due to his wife's death, they had only been there for 24 hours. He also asked for a refund of half the cost of the dive, as he never got to see the sunken ship. On October 24th, Gabe's mother flew to Townsville to support her son and help him find a lawyer. At Gabe's request, they visited the morgue to see his wife one last time. However, because Gabe was still considered a suspect, the morgue employee alerted the detective in charge of the case, who was recording the scene without Gabe's knowledge. Gabe was overcome with grief, crying and holding his wife's hand, and apologizing for not being able to protect her. Gabe's personality was a subject of conflicting opinions. Some people described him as a kind and humorous man, while others saw him as tyrannical. However, everyone agreed that Gabe and Tina's relationship was unhappy. Tina had previously confided in her friends and family that she had married Gabe out of fear of being alone, and her friends later confirmed this after her death. A friend of Tina's also came forward with a disturbing revelation. Shortly before her death, Tina had confided in this friend that Gabe had forced her to take out a life insurance policy on herself, naming him as the beneficiary. This was corroborated by the insurance agent who had sold them the policy. Furthermore, the taxi driver who drove the newlyweds to the yacht on the day of their departure told authorities that Tina had cried the entire way, while Gabe showed no concern for her distress. Amanda Phillips shared another story that sheds light on Tina's relationship. At a Christmas party, Gabe filmed her peeing in the bathroom, edited the footage, and then played it to a group of guests. He found it funny, but the other guests were embarrassed. The incident was disturbing, but another act was even more alarming. During a funeral, Gabe removed jewelry from Tina's body. However, an even more disturbing act was caught on camera during the 2008 trial. A video showed Gabe visiting Tina's grave, taking all the flowers and throwing them into a nearby trash can. Tina's father was determined to catch the person who stole the flowers from Tina's grave. He set up a hidden camera on the next row of monuments, but was shocked to see Gabe on the footage. Gabe's defense in court was that he and his wife had discussed the death of one of their relatives during their honeymoon and that the absence of flowers on the grave was her request. However, this explanation seems very strange and unlikely. The investigation into Tina's death might have taken much longer if the police hadn't discovered a crucial piece of evidence. Gabe claimed that Tina had drowned while he was trying to put a mask on her face, but this story didn't add up. It was impossible for someone to put a mask on underwater without an air supply unless they were using someone else's oxygen. In this case, the police suspected that Gabe had used Tina's oxygen to stage the incident. In November 2008, the Australian police arrested Gabe, and his trial began on June 5, 2009. Gabe initially pleaded guilty to failing to save his wife. He was convicted of negligent homicide and served 18 months in prison. After his release, he returned to the U.S., but was later charged with first-degree murder in a U.S. court. The prosecution's case hinged on the idea that Gabe had intentionally killed his wife in order to collect life insurance payouts. In his defense, Gabe's lawyer argued that the diving company was responsible for the death, alleging that their employees had failed to adequately ensure the safety of the tourists in their care. The lawyer alleged that the company was now trying to shift the blame to Gabe, fearing the loss of their business license. Gabe had already served his sentence abroad, and his lawyer argued that the insurance payout of $33,000 was outweighed by the costs of hiring lawyers and obtaining additional expert opinions. The prosecutor refused to acknowledge the irony that Gabe, a trained expert in drowning rescue, was unable to save his wife. When Gabe presented his defense, he spoke directly to the jury, expressing his emotional pain and frustration. "For 7 years, I have been haunted by the memory of that tragic day. The public has vilified me, accusing me of being responsible for my wife's death, labeling me a murderer. Not a single person has looked me in the eye and offered any compassion or understanding. Instead, many people want me to suffer, and I can only sympathize with my late wife's parents, who will understandably never forgive me, no matter how hard I try to make amends." While people often express sympathy for parents who lose a child, saying, "I can't imagine what it's like to lose a child," I've never heard anyone say, "I can't imagine what it's like to lose a spouse, especially on a honeymoon." I've been criticized for not doing enough to save my wife, Tina. I've already paid the price for that, and I've lived with the guilt for 7 years. Some of you might think I should have died with her, but I was afraid of death and wanted to survive. I wanted to live then, and I still want to live now. Regarding Gabe's case, the court found him not guilty due to lack of evidence. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Anna Repkina. On April 17, 2017, a caretaker named Russell found a dead body in the Oregon forest. The woman was Anna Repkina, a Russian native who had been shot in the head and had various trash around her body. Russell reported the discovery to the police. Anna Alexieva Repkina, from Chelyabinsk, Russia, came from a respectable family. She was intelligent, hardworking, and had a passion for travel, rock music, cats, and capturing memories through photography. Anna valued love and longed to be loved in return. She aspired to get married, have children, and build a family home. Those who knew her still cherished the memory of her infectious sense of humor, which made her a joy to be around. In 2016, Anna's 7-year relationship with her high school sweetheart came to an end, leaving her heartbroken. However, she refused to give up on her dreams of finding true love. With online dating becoming increasingly popular, Anna decided to take a chance and signed up for several websites. It was on a Russian dating site that she matched with someone who seemed to fit her ideal perfectly. His name was William Hargrove, a 26-year-old from Oregon who worked as a bouncer and mechanic. Interestingly, William had a strong affinity for Russian culture, and he claimed to have fallen for Anna as well. William treated Anna with kindness, frequently praising her. Despite being physically distant, he made an effort to be emotionally present when she needed him. His friends described him as a charismatic, passionate, and likable individual with a great sense of humor. He was a driven person who inspired those around him to pursue their goals. According to his former roommate, William had a remarkable ability to talk his way in or out of any situation. Anna and William communicated daily, and their online relationship rapidly became serious over a few months. They seemed destined to be together, sharing a deep connection. Their common interests, such as enjoying live music and having a similar sense of humor, made them a perfect match, as observed by their friends. Anna and William were very compatible. William was extremely sweet. Despite being separated by continents, he would frequently send her flowers. Soon, they started discussing meeting in person. In December 2016, they decided to take their months-old relationship to the next level. Anna booked a flight to Oregon to see William. However, Anna made a mistake on her first attempt. She accidentally booked a ticket for Portland, Maine, instead of Portland, Oregon. By the time she realized her error, she had already flown to Maine. Still, she was determined to spend the Christmas holidays with her boyfriend. She corrected her flight issues and arrived in Oregon on time. William picked her up from the airport. Anna and William shared 10 wonderful days together. He took her on guided tours, and they explored the seaside, played in the snow, and snuggled up by the fireplace. He introduced her to his friends, making their time together even more special. As the clock struck midnight on New Year's Eve, they joyfully shouted, "Happy New Year," and shared a romantic kiss. For both of them, it was the perfect Christmas, and they both felt they were meant to be together. After Anna's 10-day visit came to an end, William proposed to her with his grandmother's emerald ring, and she happily accepted. From that moment on, the two were engaged. However, what Anna was unaware of was that William had been unfaithful to her. He had been secretly involved with Michelle Chavez, his 33-year-old landlady, who was already married with 2 children. William had been renting a room in Michelle's home, and their affair had been ongoing for over a year, even before Anna's visit. In reality, Anna had unknowingly met Michelle, who was posing as William's landlady, and was in fact William's romantic rival. Michelle was aware that her boyfriend, William, had brought his girlfriend, Anna, to her home. She didn't confront them, possibly thinking that William would never leave her or that Anna was insignificant, just like her own husband. Whatever her reason, she kept quiet. However, things became clearer when Michelle discovered the engagement ring. Anna, thrilled with the news, posted a picture of her ring on Facebook. The post appeared on Michelle's homepage, thanks to the algorithm. Michelle was furious, not just because William was engaged to another woman, but because she had planned to leave her husband for him. In a bold move, Michelle took off her wedding ring and handed it to William. The ring was identical to Anna's engagement ring. It was the same one William had recycled. Michelle expressed her anger to William, who repeatedly assured her that Anna meant nothing to him and that he would break off the engagement on March 1st, 2017. Meanwhile, Anna returned to Oregon, preparation in full swing. She had packed her wedding dress in a suitcase and had even resigned from her job, ready to start a new life with her fiancé, William. Michelle grew concerned about the seriousness of Anna and William's relationship, so she decided to intervene. One day, she reached out to Anna on Facebook and revealed everything that had been going on. Anna then reported back to William about the conversation with Michelle. However, William dismissed Michelle's concerns, attributing them to jealousy as his ex. Despite this, the couple was determined to move forward with their plans, ignoring Michelle's warnings. They proceeded to schedule their wedding for March 23rd, planning to exchange vows by the seaside. Anna wore the wedding dress she had brought from Russia, and they headed to the beach for the ceremony. However, the officiant failed to show up. After waiting for what felt like an eternity, they returned home, deciding to try again in April. William consistently made it clear to Anna that she was insignificant to him and that he didn't love her. However, Anna refused to accept this. Michelle grew tired of the situation and decided to intervene. On April 15th, Michelle gave William an ultimatum. He had to choose between her and Anna. He couldn't continue to lead both women on. Michelle also issued a stark warning. If Anna wasn't gone by April 20th, she would take drastic action. Building a snowman was a sinister euphemism for killing someone and hiding their body in a location where it would remain frozen and undiscovered. After Michelle clearly expressed her feelings to William, she was unable to reach him. She assumed he had chosen Anna over her. The next day, Sunday the 16th of April, Michelle left voicemails for William in an attempt to convey her emotions. However, William called Michelle to inform her that he was single again, having ended his relationship with Anna. The breakup was messy, but Anna was in the process of returning to Russia. As it happened, William's car had collided with a deer, leaving him stranded at the Ali Murtal store. He asked Michelle to meet him there, which she agreed to, despite being in the middle of a family gathering on Easter Sunday. Michelle left her family's house and drove to the store, where she and William reconnected. They celebrated their rekindled relationship by having sex in William's car on the 17th of April. Anna's body was discovered in the forest at the start of the investigation into her death. The investigators had no idea who she was, as there was no identification on her, and she had only been in the state for about a month. There was no sign of a murder weapon, only litter scattered around her. However, among the trash, a clear plastic bag caught their attention, containing a KFC receipt, an empty Pepsi cup, and a KFC chicken bag. The KFC receipt was the crucial piece of evidence, bearing a date, time, and debit card number. The debit card was traced back to Kevin Thomas, who was subsequently tracked down by the investigators. Kevin revealed that he and William had a weekly habit of getting lunch at KFC every Friday, and the receipt was from a purchase about a week before his questioning. Kevin had been the one to expose William's complicated romantic relationships. The investigation into Anna's death was the only reason William's infidelity had ever come to light. Kevin also recalled that William had borrowed his shotgun, claiming he wanted to go to the woods to blow off some steam. After obtaining Kevin's statement, the police shifted their focus to William and Michelle. William's behavior became increasingly suspicious, as he was caught on camera in stores where he had purchased cigars and Star Wars Legos. He even confided in Kevin that he was splurging on things he couldn't afford in an attempt to lift his spirits. On the 16th, William broke down in tears in the arms of a store employee, claiming his girlfriend had just dumped him. However, William had actually moved back in with Michelle, and when questioned by the police about his whereabouts on the 16th of April, he falsely stated that he had gone for a drive with Michelle. When asked about his relationship with Anna, William denied any romance, saying he had met her in Corvallis while out walking, went on 2 dates, but realized it wouldn't work out between them, which ended things between them. William said the last time he saw Anna was in mid-March. He also mentioned that Anna had mistakenly posted about their engagement on Facebook, which caused trouble for him with his actual partner, Michelle. William was questioned about trash near his late fiancée, Anna Rapina's body. He confessed to littering, but claimed he'd thrown KFC trash away 40 miles from the scene. Investigators were skeptical. When told his trash was found near another murder victim, William was shocked, then asked for a lawyer. He was arrested April 19th for Anna's murder. Michelle was questioned after William's arrest. Initially, she stuck to their rehearsed story, saying they spent the day together. However, under continued questioning, she admitted lying and gave a new account, claiming William was supposed to call and pick her up, but never did. Later, when Michelle was being questioned by the police, they told her that her boyfriend of a year and a half was being held in custody on suspicion of murder. Her response was a simple, "Okay." The investigator found this reaction suspicious and highlighted it, which caused Michelle's emotions to become visible. She started to whimper and attributed her initial lack of reaction to being in a state of shock. William Hargrove was facing trial in October 2019 for murder, identity theft, and 2 counts of theft, charges that were filed in June 2018. The prosecution sought to have William convicted on all counts, while the defense argued that he was innocent and that Melissa, his burnt lover, was the actual perpetrator. However, the prosecution presented strong evidence against William, highlighting his motive and guilt. It was revealed that William had a second lover, Michelle, who was pressuring him to choose between her and Anna. Furthermore, evidence showed that William had driven with Anna, and his cell phone records placed him near the scene of the crime on the day of her murder, at 4:30 p.m. on Logging Road. The shotgun used to kill Anna was found in William's car, with only his fingerprints on the weapon. Moreover, despite claiming to have no involvement in Anna's death, William was caught using her money to pay off his car insurance, make ATM withdrawals, and go shopping. The prosecution alleged that William had taken Anna to the forest, shot and killed her, and then used her money to pay off his debts, all because he was choosing between Anna and Michelle. The defense argued that their client was innocent and pointed to Melissa as the prime suspect. According to them, Melissa had motives to harm Anna, having previously threatened to build a snowman with her. Furthermore, Melissa's cell phone had been found on the Logging Road just weeks before Anna's murder, suggesting she had likely been in the area to plan the crime. When searched, Melissa's house yielded Anna's cell phone, which implicated her further. Despite this, Melissa was not charged with any crimes and was called as a witness for the prosecution. Melissa took the stand to testify about her relationships, including how she met William and the dynamics between them. As a late-night cab driver, she had met William at the bar where he worked. With her husband's knowledge and consent, she started an affair with William, which grew intense over time. Eventually, William even rented a room in her house to be closer to her. Both her marriage and her relationship with William were open, meaning they allowed each other to have outside relationships. When Anna first appeared, Melissa wasn't interested. However, by Anna's second visit, which seemed like it would be a long-term stay, Melissa was upset, particularly after seeing her own wedding ring on Anna's finger. Although Melissa had given William an ultimatum, she was not involved in his harming Anna. She claimed she never intended for Anna to get hurt or, worse, lose her life. Melissa continued to defend herself against the defense's allegations. The threat about building a snowman was a joke, albeit an extreme one, which was a family joke. Her cell phone was indeed found in the forest, but William had driven her there. She had no idea why he did so or what he was planning. Furthermore, William had given her Anna's cell phone the day before he was questioned by the authorities. Melissa's testimony lasted for 14 hours. Besides Melissa, around 70 other people gave testimony, including Anna's mother, William's best friend and roommate, as well as some of Melissa's family members. In her hometown in Oregon, Melissa faced intense scrutiny, with locals criticizing and bullying her. At one point, she even attempted to take her own life, but fortunately, it was unsuccessful. Prosecutor praised Melissa's efforts, calling them tough, super tough. After a month of court appearances, the judge asked the jury to deliver a verdict. They deliberated for under 3 hours, finding no evidence linking Michelle to Anna's death, unlike William, and clearing her alibi. William maintained his not guilty plea, but the overwhelming evidence proved conclusive, and he was found guilty on all counts, receiving a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 25 years. His attorney, however, announced plans to file an appeal. The jurors in Anna's case developed a strong bond during the trial. After the verdict, they were escorted to the logging trail, the site where Anna's body was found, to pay their respects. Anna will be remembered as a brave young woman who left her Russian homeland to build a new life in the United States. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Cassie Farrington. In 2014, the townspeople of Silver City, a small town in southwestern New Mexico, were stunned to discover that 23-year-old Cassie Farrington, a local resident, had been found dead in the bathtub of her rental home, lying face down in the water. The tragedy was devastating for Cassie's parents, and things took a turn for the worse when the local police got involved in the investigation. Cassie Marie Brooks was born in Virginia on December 22, 1990, the second oldest of 4 children to Chuck and Darlene Brooks. As a high-achieving student, she was a member of the National Honor Society, played sports, and dreamed of becoming a doctor. But when she turned 16, her plans took a dramatic turn. She became pregnant. The following month saw a whirlwind of significant events. She graduated from high school, gave birth to a baby, married Bradley Farrington, and moved out of her parents' home. After having her first child, Cassie went on to have a second child several years later. Unfortunately, her family life began to fall apart around the same time, and her marriage ultimately ended in divorce when she was just 22. Following her divorce, Cassie moved to Silver City, a small town with a population of around 10,000 people, with her 2 kids in tow. There, she found work as a nurse at a local hospital and rented a home from a colleague. By her 23rd birthday, Cassie had begun a new romance with a man named David Berry, who rapidly formed a strong connection with her 2 children. Cassie confided in her family and colleagues that David brought her and the kids immense joy, and she was optimistic about finally achieving the happiness and peace that had eluded her in her previous tumultuous experience with family life. On March 24, 2014, Cassie phoned her parents after finishing her night shift at Silver City Hospital. During their several-minute conversation, she informed her mother of her plan: drive home, collect her kids, take them to school, and then return home to rest for a couple of hours before picking them up again later that day. However, the school staff attempted to contact Cassie, but she never showed up to collect the children. Cassie's mother, Darlene, attempted to reach her daughter by phone but didn't get an answer, assuming Cassie had simply forgotten to set her alarm after working a night shift. Next, Darlene contacted Sherelle, Cassie's landlord, asking her to check on Cassie. Upon arriving at the house, Sherelle knocked on the door but received no response. She then circled around the house and noticed water overflowing from the bathroom into the kitchen. Sherelle knocked on the door again, this time more forcefully, and called out Cassie's name, but there was still no response. Finally, she used her own key to unlock the house and enter. As Sherelle made her way across the wet floor towards the bathroom, the sound of flowing water grew louder and more distinct. Her voice trembled slightly as she repeatedly called out Cassie's name. When she finally reached the bathroom, Sherelle's worst fears were confirmed. Cassie lay face down in the overflowing bathtub, still wearing her house robe, with water continuing to pour out. Cassie's co-worker Sherelle, who was trained in first aid, quickly realized that it was too late to try to save her. Cassie's body had already begun to stiffen, which meant she had been dead for several hours. Sherelle immediately called 911 to report what had happened, and soon paramedics and police officers arrived at the house. Sadly, Sherelle also had to call Cassie's parents to break the devastating news that their daughter had passed away. As Sherelle waited for the paramedics to arrive, she thoroughly searched the house and made a disturbing discovery. In the second bathroom, located in a different part of the house, she found that the faucet was open and water was continuously flowing. Fortunately, this bathroom was equipped with an overflow protection device, which prevented the excess water from flooding the floor. Instead, it was safely draining away. Sherelle's attention was also drawn to the towel rack, which had been ripped from the wall and was now lying on the floor. Chuck and Darlene immediately stopped what they were doing and rushed from their home in Arizona to Silver City upon receiving the news. A couple of hours later, they arrived at the house where their daughter's lifeless body had been found. At that point, the police were already on the scene, and their investigation revealed that there were no signs of forced entry into the house. As all the locks were still intact, The windows were closed and the glass was unbroken. Valuables that might have been stolen in a break-in were left untouched in the house. This led the local police chief to ask Cassie's parents if she had a history of suicidal tendencies and if she had any reason to take her own life. However, Chuck and Darlene strongly denied this possibility, insisting that Cassie would never do such a thing because she would not put her children through such distress. Despite their objections, the police chief repeatedly suggested that Cassie had likely orchestrated her own disappearance, almost as if he was trying to convince them of this theory. Normally, a thorough investigation of the accident scene would take days, but in this case, the police left the premises just a few hours after the body was discovered, informing Chuck and Darlene that they were free to use the house. This haste puzzled Cassie's parents, and they decided to conduct their own investigation of the house. Upon inspection, they found water still in the bathtub, and when they emptied it, they noticed black streaks on the sides, similar to the marks left by rubber-soled shoes on the floor. Furthermore, they discovered various personal belongings of Cassie's scattered around, including her glasses, hairband, and a coat hanger. With all of these circumstances, Chuck and Darlene suspected that the authorities might be trying to hastily close their daughter's case as non-criminal, particularly since the police hadn't searched the house for fingerprints. It wasn't until they made a call to the DA's office that the police seemed to put in more effort, or at least gave the appearance of doing so. They likely would have preferred to close Cassie's case earlier, but the medical examiner's report made that impossible. The report revealed that Cassie's body had multiple bruises, including on her neck, and the forensic medical examiner's conclusion was that her death was a homicide, although the exact method was not specified. The scene of the crime was no longer helpful because the property owners had cleaned up and made minor renovations after the incident. As a result, the police had no new information to share with Cassie's parents over the months. The police investigated David Berry, the man Cassie had met before her death, but he was ruled out as a suspect due to his solid alibi. As time went on, Cassie's parents grew increasingly convinced that the local police were not doing enough. It wasn't until Chuck and Darlene met with the chief district attorney again and requested action be taken against Detective Jose Sanchez, who was in charge of the investigation into their daughter's death, that things started moving forward. After reviewing the case file, the district attorney agreed that Sanchez had made numerous errors. As a result, Sanchez was taken off the case, and a more seasoned detective was assigned to take over. The new detective immediately focused on the individual that Chuck and Darlene suspected was responsible for their daughter's death. From the beginning, Cassie's family and close friends were convinced that only one person had a motive to kill her: her ex-husband, Bradley Farrington. At the time of her death, Cassie and Bradley were in conflict and engaged in a bitter custody battle over their children. It was likely that the court would have ruled in favor of the children staying with their mother. It was clear to everyone that Bradley stood to gain the most from Cassie's death, as he would gain custody of the children and be relieved of his child support obligations. Many questions likely arise from this, such as why Bradley wasn't immediately considered a suspect and why he wasn't scrutinized from day one. To the average person, the answers to these questions are obvious. However, looking ahead, it's likely that officials at all levels will deny the obvious conclusions. In reality, Bradley's status as a Silver City police officer and his friendly relationships with the investigators who came to Cassie's house likely shielded him from suspicion. He left the police force just a few months before Cassie's death. In addition to having a motive, Bradley also had the necessary expertise. As a former policeman, he was familiar with police procedures and knew how to destroy evidence. The bathwater had removed any potential DNA samples from the body and erased the shoe prints on the floor. Therefore, there would have been no need for him to break down the front door, as Cassie would have opened it for him herself. Any evidence that might have linked Bradley Farrington to the crime scene was likely destroyed due to the local police's flawed investigation. The only remaining option to hold Bradley accountable was through eyewitness testimony. Cassie told her parents that Bradley regularly abused her and the kids. He even mocked her, saying she should try reporting him to the police. At the time, Bradley was a police officer in Silver City and believed he was above the law. It's hard to imagine how Cassie felt, knowing that the police, who were supposed to help her, were friends with her abusive husband. Cassie confided in her co-workers that Bradley had threatened to make her disappear, saying no one would ever find out. One day in Silver City, Cassie burst into an insurance office, extremely terrified. She reported to the staff that her husband had just tried to drive her car off the road. Tragically, Cassie was found dead on March 24, 2014. Fast forward 19 months, Bradley Farrington, 28, was arrested on October 23, 2015. When charged, he denied any involvement in Cassie's death, claiming he had no part in it. Because of the local police officer's misconduct, there was no physical evidence connecting Farrington to his ex-wife's death. As a result, the judge made the unusual decision to allow testimony from Cassie herself through her own words at the trial. During the trial, the prosecution presented numerous witnesses to the jury, including Cassie's parents, friends, and co-workers, all of whom she had confided in about the abuse she suffered at the hands of her police officer husband. Dr. Michael Hunter, San Francisco's leading forensic expert, testified at the trial, sharing his evaluation of the local expert's findings. With over 20 years of experience, he presented the jury with autopsy photographs and concluded that Cassie's death was likely caused by strangulation, citing the injuries on her neck as evidence. In his opinion, the primary cause of her death was strangulation. One witness, former Detective Sanchez, who had retired from the police force, came to court only after the judge issued a warrant. Sanchez had originally handled the case and testified at trial that he never considered Bradley Farrington a possible suspect, as there was no reason to do so. He explained that no fingerprints were taken from the house, stating that the crime scene appeared too clean. He believed the scene had been cleaned after the crime was committed, which was why no fingerprints were collected. Following 4.5 hours of deliberation, the jury found Bradley Farrington guilty on September 7, 2018. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole in 30 years. In 2020, Farrington appealed to the New Mexico Supreme Court, arguing that the trial court erred in allowing testimony from the victim's co-workers, friends, and family members, who recounted her statements about Farrington's threats and domestic violence. However, the state's highest court unanimously ruled that there was sufficient evidence to support Farrington's conviction and rejected his challenge to the hearsay testimony. Farrington is currently serving his sentence, while his 2 children are living with his parents, who are limiting their contact with the victim's parents. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. As the police started their search, they encountered a series of unexpected twists that no one could have predicted. Eventually, the detectives managed to uncover the truth about the girl's fate, but no one was ready for it. Rowan Ford was born on April 11, 1998, in San Diego, California. Her parents divorced when she was young, and her mother, Colleen, moved with her to a small town called Stella in Missouri. Later, her mom met a man named David, and they got married. Colleen had several children from a previous marriage, and soon after their wedding, she and David had a daughter together. Altogether, Rowan had 2 sisters and 2 brothers, and they shared a very close bond. She spent a lot of time outdoors, riding her bike around town, enjoying swimming, and indulging in her passion for drawing. She also liked going to Sunday school at the local church, where she always volunteered to help other kids who had some issues with their tasks. In November 2007, when Rowan was 9 years old and in the 4th grade at the local elementary school, her mom worked the night shift at a store, while her stepdad spent most of the day on the farm. This left Rowan often fending for herself, which made her very independent. On November 2nd, she stayed home alone as usual. Her mom went to work, and her stepdad hadn't returned from the farm yet. The next morning around 9 a.m., Colleen came home from her night shift and checked Rowan's room, but her daughter wasn't there. She asked her husband where her daughter was. He said she had asked him if she could have a sleepover at a friend's house, and he had let her go. He didn't even ask the friend's name because their town was very small, and he wasn't worried about anything happening to her. But Colleen started to worry and decided to check with all of Rowan's friends. Since there were only a few streets in their town, it didn't take long, but none of them had seen her, and she hadn't stayed over at any of their houses, which made her mother even more concerned. Colleen searched the whole town but couldn't find her daughter. She went back home and told her husband that Rowan was nowhere to be found. She asked him to call the police and report her missing, but he reassured her that everything was fine and that she would come home soon. After waiting for several more hours with no sign of Rowan, Colleen took matters into her own hands and dialed 911 herself. The local sheriff immediately organized a search operation. He went to their house to speak with David, as he was the last person to see Rowan before she disappeared. David said that on that evening, while he was working on the farm with his colleague Christopher, their mutual friend Nathan came by. They all decided to go to David's place to have some drinks and play pool. They stopped by the store, bought some alcohol, and went to David's house, where they spent several hours. Later in the night, Christopher asked Nathan to drive him home to the neighboring town where his trailer was, and they persuaded David to join them to continue the fun. Before leaving the house, he checked on Rowan in her room, seeing that she was asleep. David left with his friends, stopped by the store again, grabbed more alcohol, and headed to Christopher's trailer, where they continued drinking for about an hour. After that, David decided to head home and asked Nathan to give him a ride. Nathan agreed but chose to take back roads instead of the main highway. By that time, he was quite drunk and didn't want to risk encountering the police. Nathan dropped him off and drove home, while David went straight to bed. Soon after, he was awakened by Rowan, who asked if she could sleep over at a friend's house. Without much thought, he agreed and fell back asleep. Police approached this story with some skepticism. What puzzled them most was the fact that a 9-year-old girl decided to go to her friend's house in the middle of the night, and her stepfather let her go without even asking which friend she was talking about. The sheriff considered that David might be hiding something or directly involved in Rowan's disappearance, but he had no evidence to support this theory. Police searched the town and its surroundings until late at night. Local residents immediately joined the search, as they all knew Rowan's family and wanted to help. The population of Stella was only about 150 people, so news of her disappearance spread throughout the county almost instantly. People were used to being able to let their children play outside without a worry, as nothing ever happened in such a quiet place. But now, Rowan had vanished without a trace, and the police were unable to find her. For a whole day, the residents of Stella were in a state of panic. The first day of the search yielded no results. On November 4th, the police went to the neighboring town to speak with Christopher, who fully corroborated David's story. However, Christopher added that his friend hadn't even contacted him since that evening, and he had only just found out about Rowan's disappearance on the same day. The police expanded the search and involved even more volunteers, but they still couldn't find Rowan or any clues to her whereabouts. The next morning, the FBI joined the investigation while the local police continued to search for Rowan throughout the town and its surroundings. Detectives focused on exploring the possibility of abduction. They strongly doubted the stepfather's story, as it seemed highly questionable. Police also checked with all of Rowan's friends and confirmed that she hadn't visited any of them that night. Investigators continued to speak with David, and he changed certain details in his story several times, further raising suspicions against him. For instance, He gave conflicting timelines for his absence from home that night, and even said that perhaps Rowan hadn't asked him for permission to go to her friend's house and just left without his knowledge. FBI agents also discovered that on the night of her disappearance, David had asked his mother to borrow her car, a fact he had initially not disclosed to the police. As a result, they decided to seize both this car and his own pickup truck for examination, but experts were unable to uncover any evidence. Meanwhile, detectives decided to speak with Christopher and Nathan again, as they were both with David that evening. Police invited Christopher to the station. He repeated the same story as the day before. He also agreed to a polygraph test, which showed no signs of deception. Several hours after Christopher left the station and returned to work, he noticed Sheriff Clark's car and waved for him to stop. Sheriff Clark led the police department in their town called Witten and had known Christopher for 17 years since his childhood. The sheriff was friends with his foster parents, and Christopher always respected him. He often sought his advice or help in difficult times, such as when his mother passed away. Sheriff Clark approached Christopher, and they discussed Rowan's disappearance. The sheriff was aware of the case, but had not been involved in it, as the search was being handled by the Stella department. During their conversation, the sheriff felt that Christopher's behavior was quite weird, and he suspected that Christopher might be withholding some information from him. Considering that Rowan's life was at stake and her fate remained unknown, Clark decided to share his suspicions with the FBI. He contacted the agents and told them about his concerns. Investigators assumed that Christopher might be withholding some significant information that could implicate Rowan's stepfather in her disappearance. Perhaps he had asked Christopher to lie and change certain details in the story of that evening, and now Christopher feared being implicated as an accomplice if he told the truth. Sheriff Clark informed the FBI agents that he had a close and trusting relationship with Christopher, so he offered to help persuade him to talk. That same evening, Christopher went to Colleen's house to ask her if there was any progress in the search. About the same time, FBI agents also arrived to speak with Rowan's mother again. When they saw Christopher there, they also asked him some questions, and he once again repeated that the events of that evening unfolded exactly as he had previously said. But then he mentioned for the first time that he did not rule out the possibility of David's involvement in her disappearance, and said that he wanted to help them uncover the truth, no matter how terrible it might be. He even suggested wearing a wire and going to talk to David to try to coax him into confessing. But at that point, the detectives decided not to resort to such tactics. Instead, they asked Christopher if he had any locations in mind where his friend could have hidden Rowan's body, and he named several places. The next morning, police set out to search these locations as well as continuing their search in the surrounding areas of Stella. FBI agents once again brought David for questioning, but he repeatedly denied any involvement. Detectives searched his home in an attempt to find any leads, but it turned up nothing. Meanwhile, Christopher went to the sheriff's office to speak with Clark and told him about his encounter with the FBI. During their conversation, the sheriff had a strong feeling that Christopher was still withholding something. After their meeting, he contacted the detectives again and told them that Christopher might be keeping some information that could likely help them prove David's involvement. FBI agents asked the sheriff to continue trying to persuade him to talk, based on the fact that Christopher had repeatedly contacted Clark to discuss the case with him. They believed he wanted to share important information, but for some reason, he was afraid to do so. The next day, on November 7th, the police called Christopher back to the station. They needed his consent to search his safe, located in David's house. Christopher had been living with him for several months when he temporarily didn't have a place of his own, and some of his belongings were still there. Christopher gave them his permission and also agreed to allow the police to search his trailer and his car. He also voluntarily provided them with a DNA sample and agreed to answer the detectives' questions again. They began questioning him about that evening, and once again asked him to confirm David's story. But this time, Christopher suddenly admitted that his friend's story wasn't entirely true. The investigators began pressing him to tell them what really happened, but this pressure only caused Christopher to become agitated. He said that if the police were going to treat him like a criminal and attempt to accuse him of involvement in Rowan's disappearance, he would not continue this conversation. After that, detectives had to end the interrogation, and Christopher left the station. That same evening, he went to Sheriff Clark and told him about it. He complained that the detectives were treating him like a suspect and said that he might need to hire a lawyer. The sheriff replied that it was his right, but asked him to understand that the police were just doing everything possible to find Rowan. In response, Christopher stated that he would no longer speak with them, and that if he wanted to share anything else, he would only speak with Clark. The sheriff continued to persuade Christopher to tell him everything he knew, and at some point, Christopher began to cry. He said that he always loved Rowan and would never harm her. During the time when he lived in David's house, he developed a close bond with Rowan and the other children. They began to treat him like a family member and even called him Uncle Christopher. The sheriff understood that Christopher was on the brink of revealing everything he knew. However, just as Christopher was about to speak, someone arrived at the police station, distracting Sheriff Clark for some time. Christopher left the office without sharing what he had intended to. Sheriff Clark reached out to the FBI again and told them about this conversation. He explained that Christopher was almost ready to disclose everything he knew, but cautioned that pushing him too hard might cause him to stop talking and get an attorney. Clark suggested giving Christopher some time to think it over, and the detectives agreed. The search for Rowan continued the next day, again with no luck, but everything changed on November 9th, a week after her disappearance. Search groups reached a remote area near a town called Powell, 10 miles from Stella. There, amidst fields and trees, they discovered a large pit in the ground. When they looked there, they found Rowan's body concealed under leaves and debris. She was missing all clothing below the waist, except for one sock. Medical experts found signs of strangulation and also determined that she had been sexually assaulted. Shortly after the body's discovery, FBI agents contacted Sheriff Clark and asked him to speak with Christopher again, hoping he would now reveal everything. Sheriff learned that earlier that morning, Christopher had visited the station when he wasn't there and informed other officers that he needed to speak urgently with Clark. The sheriff set out to search for Christopher, checking all the places where he might be, but the man was nowhere to be found. It continued until Christopher called Clark himself. He was clearly distressed and asked if he was being followed. He explained that after hearing the news about Rowan's body being found, he drove around town to clear his head and noticed a gray car tailing him. Sheriff Clark replied that he knew nothing about any surveillance and suggested meeting Christopher in person. When they met, Christopher was visibly nervous and expressed concern for his safety. He feared that after Rowan's body was discovered, he might be accused of murder, and someone might seek revenge against him. Clark took him to the station and said that now that the case had been classified as a homicide, it was time to reveal everything he knew. Christopher began crying again, and the sheriff asked him to tell what David had done to Rowan. In response, Christopher stated that there were too many people at the police station and he didn't want to discuss it there. He suggested going to a quieter place and mentioned a small bridge located a few miles from their town. Clark agreed, and they drove there together. As they got out of the car, Christopher unexpectedly raised his hands and said that the sheriff should handcuff him. The sheriff was surprised and replied that it wasn't necessary, but Christopher insisted, saying, "After what I tell you, you'll have to do it." After this, he began talking. Christopher repeated the first part of the story he had told the police many times. He, along with Nathan and David, went to his trailer, where they continued drinking. Sometime later, his friends decided to head home, and David asked Nathan for a ride. They said they would take back roads to avoid the police and left. But then Christopher started telling something that shocked the sheriff to the core. He claimed that he wanted to sexually assault Rowan and quickly came up with a plan. Knowing his friends would take quite some time on the road through the fields, he got into his car and drove straight to David's house, taking the main highway. He entered Rowan's room, picked her up, and carried her to his car, doing it all so that she wouldn't wake up. After that, he took her to his trailer where he assaulted her. According to him, she only woke up at that moment and tried to resist, but she couldn't break free. Christopher didn't turn on the lights or speak to her because he didn't want Rowan to recognize him. After the crime, he planned to take her back home and leave, but things didn't go as planned. When he carried Rowan out of the trailer, the moon was shining brightly and she saw his face. Christopher panicked, grabbed a rope, and strangled her. When she passed away, he loaded her body into the car and started thinking about what to do next. At first, he wanted to dump her from the bridge, the same one where he stood with Sheriff Clark, but Christopher realized that her body would be found too quickly. So, he got behind the wheel and began driving around the county, considering other options. Soon, he remembered the large pit near the neighboring town and headed there. He dumped the body into the pit and tried to cover it with branches, but the pit was too large, so everything fell down. When he returned to the trailer, he found traces of Rowan's blood on his clothes and mattress. Christopher also realized he needed to get rid of her pants, underwear, and the rope he used to kill her. He collected all these items and placed them in a large barrel, intending to burn them. However, Christopher quickly realized that such a fire would definitely attract attention, so he dragged the barrel into the shed, closed the door, and started the fire there. Sheriff Clark was completely taken aback by this story. All this time, he thought David had committed the crime, and Christopher was just withholding some information. It was hard for him to believe that the man he had known for almost 20 years was capable of such brutality. Christopher himself had 3 young children, and although he didn't live with them after divorcing his wife, he always seemed like a decent man to him. But reality turned out to be way more chilling. After Christopher finished his story, he agreed to voluntarily go to the station, and the sheriff didn't handcuff him. Only after they arrived and the man repeated his confession to the FBI agents, he was arrested on charges of murder. Christopher also signed a voluntary consent to search his trailer and car. Ending his confession, he added that he regretted his actions and said that he cried like a baby all the next day. The detectives immediately went to speak with David and informed him that Christopher had confessed to the murder. Considering David's strange behavior and inconsistent statements, they suspected that he might have been covering for his friend. However, they were met with an even more shocking twist. When David was brought in for questioning, he suddenly changed his version of events. According to him, the night he returned home and found Rowan missing from her room, he realized that Christopher might have taken her. So, he took his mother's car and drove to his trailer. Upon entering, he saw the girl on the bed with Christopher leaning over her. Instead of rescuing Rowan, David decided to join in. He also sexually assaulted her. Then he helped his friend kill her and dispose of the body. David added that during the ordeal, his brain simply shut off, and he remembered nothing about the night for several days. The detectives, who were not expecting such a twist, went back to Christopher to confirm David's words. However, Christopher stated that his friend was not involved and that everything happened as he had told them. This further baffled the detectives, but Christopher's story matched the facts. Medical experts confirmed that the victim had been strangled with a thin rope, a detail only the killer would know. During a search of the trailer, the police found a barrel with ashes. In his car, they also discovered hair comparable to Rowan's. Despite investigators still being unable to confidently determine whose version of events was truthful, both men provided incriminating statements. So David was also arrested, and the cases were sent to court. During the trial, Christopher filed a motion to exclude all his statements from the case materials. claiming he was unaware they could be used against him and that the police violated his rights. But the judge denied this motion since all his conversations with investigators were entirely voluntary. Christopher also attempted to plead mitigating circumstances, pointing out his difficult childhood. From an early age, he was constantly shuffled between biological and foster parents, which greatly impacted him. Christopher also invited an expert who claimed he had signs of developmental issues, but none of this helped him avoid punishment. In 2012, 5 years after the murder, he was sentenced to death. He tried to appeal this sentence, but to no avail. As for David, the situation was much more complicated. He admitted to assaulting and killing Rowan, but there was one serious problem. His version contradicted Christopher's statements. If the prosecution decided to charge David with murder, it could potentially lead to Christopher's sentence being overturned, and David might also avoid responsibility. Considering there was no solid evidence against David, such as DNA, the prosecution could not take such a risk. In fact, they still weren't sure if he was involved at all. The prosecution did not rule out the possibility that David might have indeed committed the crime together with Christopher, but there was no evidence to support this theory. In the end, a difficult decision was made. To avoid the risk of Christopher's sentence being overturned, they reduced David's charges to much lighter ones. He pleaded guilty to 2 charges: child endangerment and obstruction of justice. He was sentenced to 11 years in prison, with a minimum of 5 years to be served behind bars. This sentence was met with outrage. If David was indeed involved in the murder, his punishment was deemed incomparable to the severity of the crime. However, there's nothing that can be done about it now, and it's unlikely that he will ever be tried again for this case. As for Christopher, he remains in prison awaiting execution. Considering that decades often pass between sentencing and execution, there are no guarantees that the death penalty will ever be carried out. It's quite possible that he will simply spend the rest of his life in prison. On April 10, 2019, 17-year-old Tristan Borlas, who murdered his parents at their family home in Deep Gap, North Carolina. That Wednesday evening, a girl called emergency services, reporting a large amount of blood in her house and 3 missing family members, her parents and her younger brother, none of whom were answering their phones. The police immediately dispatched officers to Deep Gap, a small town near the border of Watauga and Wilkes counties. Upon arrival, officers discovered blood on the stone steps leading to the house, on the porch, and on the doormats. The search revealed the body of Jeffrey Borras under a hammock behind an outbuilding, with multiple stab wounds to the abdomen. Later, around 10:30 p.m., they found a pickup truck hidden in the woods. Inside, they discovered the body of a woman covered with a blanket and bags of mulch piled on top. Jeffrey Borras, Tristan's father, was born on April 16, 1975, into a deeply religious family. His father, Pastor Harry Borras, was a member of the Conservative Church of the Spiritual Bible Brotherhood, a strict religious movement. Jeffrey was raised in an environment of strict religious discipline, constant Bible study, and moral edification. Entertainment, laughter, and bright clothing were strictly forbidden. Good deeds, charity, missionary work, love for enemies, and nonviolence were considered virtues. Jeffrey internalized these teachings, growing up to be a kind, loving, gentle, and patient individual. During his youth, he secured a summer job at a water park in Missouri. On his first day of work, he met a charming girl who would later become an important part of his life. The family was known for their strong faith and active involvement in their church and community. Jeffrey's upbringing in such a devout household was intended to instill a deep sense of morality and duty. Despite this, the family was not immune to tragedy. The events of April 10, 2019 were shocking and inexplicable to those who knew them. Tristan, raised in the same religious environment, committed an act that was completely at odds with the values he had been taught. As the investigation unfolded, details about the family's dynamics and Tristan's state of mind began to emerge. Neighbors and friends were bewildered, struggling to understand What could have driven a young man from such a devout family to commit such a heinous act? A girl named Tanya met a boy named Jeffrey. They were the same age, shared the same views, and had similar upbringings. Like Jeffrey, Tanya grew up in a family where Christian values were central. She was patient, humble, and selfless, and saw in Jeffrey an ideal future husband and caring father. She gave Jeffrey a photo of an elderly couple holding hands, saying, "One day, this will be us." Jeffrey's mother, Katie Brown, had prayed for a God-loving wife for her son, and her prayers were answered. The young lovers married and lived according to their religious beliefs. The photo was kept in the family album. Later, the young couple had their first child, a charming girl named Taylor, followed by 3 more children. Tristan was the youngest. Taylor, as the oldest, took care of and supported her siblings. She was especially close to Tristan, acting as his best friend despite their age difference. Following their religious beliefs, Jeffrey and Tanya aimed to instill the mindset of God in their children's hearts. When their 4 children grew up, they adopted 4 more boys from an orphanage. Their loving family grew to 8 children: Taylor, twins Kai and Alexis, Misery, Al, Stephen, Miku, and Tristan. The children were forbidden from using mobile phones and social networks until a certain age, and asceticism in needs and desires was encouraged. Boys were forbidden to date until after high school, and Bible study was mandatory. Despite these rules, the children grew up like any other boys and girls, with their parents showing no distinction between their biological and adopted children, giving all equal care and affection. Their home had a harmonious atmosphere, with their mother paying close attention to the children and praying frequently. The couple believed in setting a virtuous example for their children. When a hurricane hit Haiti, Tanya sold her expensive wedding ring and sent the money to a fund for constructing housing for the victims, replacing her ring with a simple, cheap one. In 2015, Taylor graduated from high school and moved to Boone to attend Appalachian State University. Tristan lost his only friend and felt alone. Although Taylor visited whenever she could, she had her own life, leaving Tristan at home. From childhood, he had rebelled against the restrictions and religious views of his parents, and he was frustrated by the ban on using a phone to communicate on social media, an essential part of modern teenage life. With Taylor gone, his arguments with his parents increased. In December 2017, the family experienced positive changes when Jeffrey, Tanya, and their children moved to a new house in Deep Gap, Watauga County, North Carolina. This house, located on a dirt road leading into the forest, was much more spacious and closer to Tanya's mother, Robin, allowing her to help with the younger children. However, for Tristan, the move might not have been entirely positive since he had to change schools. He attended a local high school in Watauga and began participating in athletics. The other children found jobs as counselors at summer camps. Despite appearances, not everything was fine. Tristan's behavior started causing problems. In 2018, the school required him to attend therapy sessions for anger and impulsive behavior. By 2019, despite his excellent abilities, he struggled with some school subjects, which worsened over time. Once a great student, Tristan became indifferent to studying. He frequently arrived late to class and sometimes refused to study altogether, often putting on headphones and appearing disengaged. Some teachers tried to help Tristan, and he initially accepted their assistance, but his interest waned quickly. At home, he continued to argue with his parents, even though he was eventually allowed to use a phone. Tristan spent a lot of time on the internet and referred to himself as a musician on Instagram. Taylor, still interested in her siblings' lives, noticed Tristan frequently argued with their mother about religious topics. She also discovered his other problems at school. She tried to talk to him, but their relationship was no longer trusting. Eventually, Tristan became friends with a girl from the religious community, Evelyn Faith Jackson. They started dating, ignoring the ban on intimate relationships, and sometimes smoked illegal substances. Tristan often complained about his mother, who discussed his behavior with him at night, making him tired and unable to concentrate at school. He worried about his problems and not meeting his mother's expectations, He felt he could be himself around his father, but not his mother. On April 10, 2019, many of Tristan's secrets were revealed. Surveillance cameras were installed in the barn, and his old phone, which he sometimes used secretly, became an access point. That day, Tanya took his phone and read messages about intimate topics and illegal substances. Tristan at school saw incoming messages, and his shocked parents texted him in the family chat about what they found. That same day, Sherry King, an English teacher, called Tristan's mother to complain about his academic performance and behavior. At the trial, she will say Tanya called her back, informing her that she and her husband would come to school to discuss it with Tristan. Sherry told Tristan about this, and he was very surprised. His parents left the youngest child with his grandmother and went to the high school. They drove home in silence. At the trial, Tristan will say his mother was tense and frowned, constantly flipping through messages on his phone. At home, the conversation lasted about an hour and a half. Tanya sent a message to her mother at 4 p.m., saying Tristan wasn't upset about losing his phone and car keys until his grades and behavior improved, and that she would soon pick up the youngest child. After that, the conversation continued. According to Tristan, he and his mother talked about studying, relationships with girls, and illegal substances. Tanya told him she didn't want him to study other religions. Besides Christianity, he was forced to listen to her and realized his many flaws. They even made a list of qualities he should develop to become a better person: compassion, honor, honesty, etc. The police would later find this list. According to Tristan, his mother approached him from behind, wrapped her arms around his neck, and he instinctively jumped up, turned around, and accidentally hit her with his elbow. He claimed his mother had never done anything like this before, which is why he freaked out. His mother, scared, grabbed scissors and moved toward him. Shocked, he stabbed her with a knife, believing he was defending himself, then ran to his father for help. A forensic examination would later find no evidence that his mother tried to strangle him. During the trial, the prosecution showed photographs of Tanya Borlas's neck with a broken bone. A psychologist testified that Tristan Borlas was mentally sane, but experiencing depersonalization and derealization. However, the court and jury dismissed this, considering Tristan a manipulator and dangerous. According to Tristan's statement, he did not understand why his father was running away or why he stabbed him, even though he begged for help. He remembered his father taking a stone and saying, "Tristan, don't do this," but believed his father would rather die than harm his son. Neighbors reported hearing loud screams at about 5:30 p.m. that Wednesday from the Borlas family's property. Afterward, Tristan returned home and vomited, which a psychologist indicated as a sign of stress. However, the jury disagreed. The autopsy report showed Jeffrey Borlas had multiple stab wounds to the left chest and back, cuts on his arms and hands, and scratch marks on his skull and forehead. Tanya Borlas's autopsy indicated several stab wounds to the left chest, back, and arm, as well as injuries likely from neck compression. The results indicated that the parents were defending themselves, not attacking. Tristan had the chance to flee from his mother, and even if he was mentally unstable and acted in self-defense, killing his father, his subsequent actions were suspicious. Tristan returned home, dragged his mother's body into the truck, concealed it under a blanket, then spent about an hour cleaning the crime scene, even using a hose to wash the porch. Around 8:30 p.m., Tristan arrived at his grandmother's to pick up his younger brother. Robin found this odd, but Tristan claimed their parents went to the store and ran out of time. 20 minutes later, Robin received a call from another grandson, complaining that his parents weren't answering their phones and hadn't picked him up from his part-time job as usual. Robin called Alexis, asking her to get her brother. They decided to meet at Jeffrey and Tanya's house to figure out what happened. As Robin approached the house, she noticed blood on the porch but thought it was from the animals the couple bred. Entering the house to get a flashlight, she saw blood everywhere. Alexis then ran in, saying she found a body under a hammock near the animal shed and saw Tristan, with blood on his face, driving away. Alexis called emergency services, and the operator advised her to lock herself in the car with her family and wait for the police. The police arrived 10 minutes later. After several hours outside and talking to officers, they went to the station and were informed that Jeffrey and Tanya Borlis had been found dead. During the crime scene inspection, detectives discovered a video surveillance system inside the house. They found the monitor broadcasting live video and requested a warrant to obtain the data from the service company. Meanwhile, Tristan contacted his friend Evelyn and went to her house. Evelyn noticed several scratches on his forehead and hands, but Tristan claimed they were from an argument with his parents and playing with the dog. Evelyn recalled seeing 3 scratches on his forehead, a wound on his arm, a cut on his finger, and a bruised nail. Following the crime, Tristan swiftly took to Snapchat, sharing a photo of his injuries, attributing them to his father's dog, as recounted by his girlfriend. She confirmed the injuries depicted in the photo mirrored what she had witnessed earlier that evening. Tristan opted to spend the night at Evelyn's residence. The subsequent morning, they initially planned to attend school, but had a change of heart. Suspecting Tristan's intent to flee his parental constraints, Evelyn extended an offer for him to seek refuge with one of her relatives, an offer he accepted. They embarked on a journey to another state on April 11th. Meanwhile, the sheriff's office gained access to video surveillance footage at the Borris household, shedding light on the intricate details of the crime. An arrest warrant was swiftly issued for Tristan. Officer Matthew received intelligence suggesting Tristan's presence in Tennessee, prompting him to enlist the assistance of Robin for the apprehension. Tristan, accompanied by Evelyn, noticed the telltale blue lights of police cars trailing them, prompting suspicions that his parents had reported the car stolen. Attempting to evade capture, he ultimately succumbed to the inevitable, his Ford encircled by police vehicles. Evelyn's shock was palpable as she witnessed her boyfriend being handcuffed and escorted into a police cruiser. Officers observed Tristan's lack of distress or concern. Subsequent to his interrogation on April 11th, 2019, Tristan, a mere month shy of his 18th birthday, confessed to all charges, leading to his incarceration without bail. Later, officers secured warrants to investigate Tristan's Snapchat account and his arsenal of 5 phones for potential evidence. A thorough search was also conducted at a residence on Orchard Road, unearthing a plethora of items. Additionally, a search was carried out on a Ford F-150, revealing further incriminating evidence. The meticulous investigation of Tristan's girlfriend's residence in Boone revealed a plethora of additional items, ranging from a pillowcase to a zip-up hoodie and a notebook. Tristan's feeble attempt at self-defense crumbled under the weight of evidence, leaving his narrative in shambles. The somber procession of Jeff and Tanya's funeral procession on April 17, 2019. With solemn reverence, Pastors William Cran and Brad Gray presided over the ceremony, offering solace to the grieving hearts of the children left behind. Despite the weight of their loss, these resilient souls found the courage to compose a poignant obituary, a testament to the enduring love and selflessness of their departed parents. In the aftermath of the funeral, Taylor visits her incarcerated brother for the first time. What she encountered within the cold confines of the prison walls shattered her illusions. Tristan's demeanor betrayed not an ounce of remorse, but instead brimmed with a misplaced sense of entitlement, as he sought to deflect blame onto their unsuspecting family. Disillusioned and heartbroken, Taylor left, her faith in her brother shattered. Undeterred by her initial disappointment, Taylor returned for a second visit on May 11th, hoping for a semblance of redemption. Yet, Tristan's callous indifference remained steadfast, further alienating him from his grieving sister. It was then that the family made the agonizing decision to sever all ties with Tristan, recognizing that his presence posed a threat to their emotional well-being. As the wheels of justice turned, Tristan's trial commenced on February 16, 2022, a solemn affair marked by solemnity and gravitas. Here Tristan, faced with the consequences of his actions, expressed contrition, acknowledging the gravity of his deeds. He concurred with his family's damning assessments of his character, acknowledging the necessity of cutting ties for their own safety. On March 3, 2024, Tristan Borlas was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, a fitting denouement to a tragic tale of loss and betrayal. While recognizing Tristan's mental health struggles as mitigating factors, Judge Horn emphasized the absence of psychotic disorders in the psychologist's evaluation, affirming the severity of Tristan's crimes and the irreversible consequences of his actions. Although anxiety and depression can indeed be worsened by persistent use of illicit substances, it is peculiar that neither Tristan's family, nor his lawyer, nor Tristan himself elaborated on the motives behind the crime. It suggests either a lack of full comprehension on Tristan's part or a deliberate ignorance. Conversely, Tristan, a self-loathing teenager with low self-esteem prone to depression and displaying active symptoms of anxiety. Tristan recounted experiencing panic attacks, which his mother, having undergone similar experiences, assisted him in managing. Assertion that children, inherently immoral due to original sin, require correction through education and strict discipline to cultivate proper behavior, may further elucidate Tristan's upbringing. Raised within rigid boundaries, he constantly grappled with feelings of inadequacy, exacerbated by jealousy towards his parents' attention to his new siblings. Initially rebellious, he spiraled into a depressive state, compounded by substance abuse, panic attacks, depersonalization, and derealization. His resistance to his parents, religiosity, and the pressure to conform to his mother's ideals culminated in a jointly composed list of necessary changes, serving as his breaking point. Could this tragedy have been averted in a truly nurturing family environment? Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Amanda Plass. Amanda Lynn Pla was born on December 11, 1990, in Chappie, Massachusetts. She grew up there with her siblings, Emily and Nicholas. According to her mother, Michelle Myers, Amanda was a free spirit, often jokingly told that she was born in the wrong generation. In 2011, Amanda worked as a waitress at Friendly's in Chappie. At the time, she was dating 27-year-old Seth Green, a carpenter. On August 26, 2011, Seth called 911, frantic and crying, reporting that he had found Amanda unresponsive on the kitchen floor of her third-floor apartment. He described her as already unconscious, with multiple wounds visible on her body. Seth was in shock, asking the operator to send both the police and an ambulance. When paramedics responded to the emergency call, they found Amanda deceased from multiple stab wounds, including injuries to her chest, throat, and abdomen. The police promptly secured the crime scene, cordoning off the house where the incident occurred. Upon their arrival, officers encountered Seth on the porch, visibly distraught and in a state of shock. A thorough search of Amanda's apartment was conducted by detectives who sought to gather evidence from the crime scene. Although the perpetrator had fled the scene, they left behind crucial clues. Initial observations revealed a substantial amount of blood splatter in the kitchen, leading detectives to conclude that the attack had taken place there, and that the likely weapon was a knife, which the perpetrator had taken with them. Furthermore, police discovered visible shoe impressions from Nike sneakers on the floor and broken glass in the room, where a palm print was also found. The brutal crime's motive remained a mystery, but detectives suspected Amanda knew her attacker and that personal animosity drove the crime, given the nature and number of wounds on her body. Consequently, the primary suspect was Amanda's boyfriend, Seth Green, who was taken to the police station for questioning. Amanda's death was a devastating shock to her family, with her mother, Michelle Mathis, struggling to come to terms with the severity of the situation. Sadly, Amanda's death was not the only heartache her family would have to endure, a topic that will be explored further in due course. As I mentioned earlier, the police took Seth Green in for questioning, which wasn't surprising given the circumstances. He was the obvious first suspect, being Amanda's boyfriend, with blood stains on his clothes, and the one who had dialed 911. It transpired that he and Amanda had started dating less than 2 weeks prior to her death, and her family knew very little about him. Although he was 7 years older and might have had differing views on certain matters, it was unclear whether this could have led to an argument that escalated into a brutal crime. The investigators naturally considered the possibility that Seth might have committed the crime, claiming Amanda was already dead when he arrived at her apartment. They established that a 2-hour window existed between Seth's 911 call and Amanda's death. This time frame would have allowed him sufficient opportunity to destroy evidence and dispose of the murder weapon. Consequently, the detective's primary question was whether Seth Green was responsible for Amanda's death. Seth appeared at the police station, visibly shaken and distraught, overcome with grief over the loss of his girlfriend. His tears flowed freely, prompting the investigators to wonder whether his emotional display was genuine or an attempt to divert suspicion from himself. During the interrogation, Seth explained that he had been at work all day and had planned to drive Amanda to the restaurant where she was employed, but his own work commitments had prevented him from doing so. Although their relationship was relatively new, Seth claimed that he had strong feelings for Amanda and had no motive to harm her. Seth was a carpenter at a construction site. The investigators questioned him about the tools he used for work, implying that he might have used one of them to commit a crime. As a carpenter, Seth wore a tool belt on the job, which held various carpentry tools, including a knife. However, he claimed that he always left the tool belt at the construction site after his shift, and this particular day was no different. After finishing his work, Seth changed out of his work clothes, left his tools behind, and went to meet Amanda. Seth was the prime suspect in his girlfriend's death, but he maintained his innocence. Ultimately, the police verified his alibi. He even passed a polygraph test. The construction boots he wore when they arrived didn't match the Nike sneaker prints found at the crime scene. Furthermore, his shoe size was significantly larger than the prints, and the palm print on the glass didn't belong to him either. Considering all the evidence, the police cleared Seth's name. Amanda had put up a fierce fight, so the attacker must have had scratches. In the weeks following the crime, the police found skin particles under Amanda's nails, which they thought would lead to a breakthrough. Unfortunately, after testing the DNA sample, they couldn't find a match in any of their databases. The motive behind the crime remains unclear. Although there were valuable items in Amanda's room that could have been targeted in a robbery, they were left untouched. Moreover, the police did not find any signs of forced entry. There are two possible explanations for how the perpetrator gained access. Either Amanda knew the person and let them in voluntarily, or she might have accidentally left the door unlocked. Amanda's colleagues and friends were interviewed by investigators, who discovered that the crime might have stemmed from a love triangle. Prior to Amanda dating Seth, she was in a relationship with another man, but their breakup was acrimonious. According to those familiar with the situation, Amanda initiated the breakup, and her ex-boyfriend was reportedly unhappy about it. Unrequited love often drives people to make rash decisions that have devastating consequences. As a result, the investigators looked into this lead, but ultimately found nothing. Amanda's ex-boyfriend provided his DNA and fingerprints, neither of which matched the samples found under Amanda's fingernails or on the broken window glass in her room. Moreover, he had a solid alibi. The police explored various leads, but none led to a breakthrough in solving Amanda's murder. As a result, the investigation stalled. Determined to seek justice, Amanda's family took matters into their own hands. They distributed flyers and sponsored car races, hoping someone would come forward with crucial information. Michelle, Amanda's mother, acknowledged that her daughter was not faultless, but she couldn't fathom why someone would take her life and why no one was willing to cooperate with the police. However, Amanda's family soon faced another distressing challenge. They discovered that several police officers had taken photos of Amanda's body with their personal phones and shared them with others, including civilians. According to the police internal affairs report, Sergeant Keith Lame, a senior officer responsible for securing the 73 School Street apartment where Amanda was fatally stabbed on August 26, 2011, was among those who took the photos. He emailed the image from his cell phone to another police sergeant, who then passed it to a patrolman. The officer subsequently shared the photo with civilians, including coaches at a youth football game. Records reveal that Lame captured a photo using his cell phone. He subsequently sent it to Sergeant Jeffrey Godare, who then forwarded the image via email to Patrolman Chad Levesque. For unknown reasons, Officer Levesque chose to share the disturbing photo of homicide victim Amanda lying on her kitchen floor with other football coaches. Captain William Jebb, the internal affairs officer, reported that the photos were shown to at least 3 coaches at a youth football game in Agawam the day after the homicide. Around the same time, Patrolman Terry Deck, responsible for logging all apartment activity for state police, took a photo of Amanda's body and sent it to 6 Chicopee police officers via individual emails. The investigation found that all 6 officers deleted the emails without reporting them, and no disciplinary action was taken against them. Their names were not mentioned in the records. The rest of the officers involved faced consequences for incompetence and failing to meet work standards. Deck and Lame, who took the photos, received formal reprimands, while Godare and Levesque were punished with 3 unpaid shifts. Following Amanda's stepfather's call to the police on September 28, 2011, an internal investigation was launched. His friend had claimed to have seen photos of the crime scene, which had taken place a month earlier. Despite their best efforts, it wasn't until about 2 years later that a breakthrough was finally made in the case. The investigators re-examined all the evidence to determine if they had overlooked any crucial details. In Amanda's bedroom, a previously unseen clue caught their attention on a dry erase board. The handwritten message read, "Dennis was here, 8/11, which became significant since it was dated only 15 days prior to Amanda's body being discovered in her apartment. What was striking was that this critical piece of evidence had been in plain sight the entire time, yet nobody had noticed it until now. It wasn't until investigators started asking around that they realized they didn't know who Dennis was. The name didn't come up at all during the entire investigation. So detectives decided to dig deeper, scouring Amanda's phone records and social media posts to see if she had any connections to someone by that name. They also interviewed her friends, family, and coworkers, and that's when Amanda's ex-boyfriend shared some interesting information. He told them that Amanda's apartment had been broken into several times when she wasn't home, and that she suspected a young Puerto Rican man whose name started with the letter D. Amanda had tried to handle the situation calmly, as she knew the guy, and had even met with him to talk about the break-ins. However, when she brought it up, he denied any involvement. Amanda then revealed that a neighbor had seen him in her apartment and politely asked him to return her stolen belongings. But the guy got defensive and stormed out. Now, one of the most crucial tasks for the investigators was to find out who Dennis was and whether he was the one who took Amanda's life. They discovered that at the time of the crime, a man named Dennis Rosa Roman lived just 3 blocks from the house where Amanda died. A background search on Rosa Roman revealed a history of breaking and entering. However, there was no palm print to compare to the one they found at Amanda's home. The police located Dennis in Westfield, Massachusetts, and requested that he come to the station for an informal talk, but he refused. When they spoke with him, he appeared extremely nervous and agitated. However, in November 2013, 22-year-old Rosa Roman unexpectedly showed up at the police station. The police inquired about Dennis's relationship with Amanda, and although Dennis acknowledged knowing Amanda from their hometown, he claimed he hadn't seen her in a couple of years. His response was plausible, given that Amanda had died 2 years prior. Next, investigators asked if he had ever visited Amanda's apartment And Dennis replied that he had never been there, saying he didn't know her well at all. He revealed that he occasionally sold Amanda marijuana, explaining that these were the rare instances when their paths crossed. During the interrogation, Rosa Roman consented to provide a DNA sample from his mouth and disclose his shoe size, which matched the shoes found at the crime scene. The officers observed that Rosa Roman was wearing Nike Air Max shoes, the same brand as the footwear documented in the bloody tracks at the crime scene, but with a different tread pattern. After providing his DNA, Rosa Roman declined to answer further questions from the investigators, promising to return to the police station in a few days to continue the conversation. At that point, the police had no grounds to detain him, so he was released. There were concerns that he might flee, which could have stalled the investigation. Amanda's phone records revealed that she had 9 conversations with Dennis on July 28, 2011. The records indicated that Amanda initiated 4 of these calls, while Dennis made 5 calls to her. Later, Rosa Roman returned to the police station, having kept his promise. However, he altered his approach, claiming that he occasionally communicated with Amanda. He alleged that Amanda had confided in him about someone breaking into her apartment on multiple occasions when she was not present. According to Rosa, Amanda didn't report these incidents to the police because the perpetrator didn't steal anything of value. At this stage, the investigators had heard the break-in story multiple times and were almost convinced that Rosa Roman was responsible, entering Amanda's apartment when she was away. They were increasingly suspicious that the man was concealing information, and they couldn't find an alternative explanation for his altered testimony. The only remaining questions were what he was hiding and how he was connected to Amanda's death. When investigators presented Rosa Roman with the photo of the dry erase board featuring the message, "Dennis was here on 8/11/11, he suddenly recalled writing it, contradicting his earlier claim that he had never entered Amanda's apartment. The DNA test results proved he had provided false testimony, as his DNA matched the samples found under Amanda's fingernails, and the palm print on the glass was also identified as his. This conclusive evidence established a direct link between Rosa Roman and the crime. After realizing the police had gathered enough evidence for his arrest, Rosa Roman altered his testimony for the 3rd time. He now asserted he was present at the crime scene and attempted to rescue Amanda from her attacker, suggesting someone else was involved. When investigators pressed him to identify the perpetrator, Rosa Roman declined, supposedly fearing for his family's safety and his own. Nevertheless, he provided specific details about the individual who allegedly took Amanda's life. The suspect, according to Rosa Roman, was tall, white, light-skinned, blue-eyed, and weighed between 170 and 200 pounds. He wore old pants, dirty boots, and a t-shirt with the phrase, "Why drink and drive when you can smoke and fly," emblazoned on it. Despite Dennis's testimony, detectives remained skeptical, as all the evidence suggested that only one person was present when Amanda was stabbed. Rosa Roman was subsequently arrested and charged with Amanda's murder. The trial commenced nearly 3 years later, in 2016. Rosa Roman's attorneys presented a defense that their client was indeed present at the crime scene, but they maintained he was not the perpetrator of Amanda's murder. Moreover, they alleged that the police conducted a flawed investigation, suggesting that they wrongly accused Dennis of the crime after an unsuccessful inquiry. The defense team pointed out that despite having all the necessary information, it took the police 2 years to confront Dennis. Rosa Roman stated that on the day Amanda died, he was forced by his drug dealer to accompany the dealer to Amanda's apartment, supposedly because Amanda owed the dealer around $500 or $600. The dealer demanded his money, so he took Rosa Roman to Amanda's apartment, where the situation escalated out of control. The dealer pulled out a knife and began stabbing Amanda. Rosa Roman claimed he wanted to intervene and help Amanda, but was unable to stop the dealer. At one point, Amanda grabbed his hand, which is why his DNA was left under her nails. However, the prosecutors had a different account of events. They thought Rosa Roman had broken into Amanda's apartment when she was away during one of his illegal intrusions. On one of these occasions, he left a message with his name on the board, which Amanda correctly suspected was written by the trespassing Rosa Roman. This led her to call him, demanding he return what he had stolen, resulting in 9 phone calls between Amanda and Rosa Roman. On the day of Amanda's death, Rosa Roman broke into her apartment again, thinking she would be at work, but Amanda was home, and a violent argument ensued, ending with Rosa Roman taking Amanda's life. After 8 days of testimony and 5 hours of deliberation, a 12-person jury found Rosa Roman guilty of causing Amanda's death in July 2016. The court then sentenced Roman to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The internal audit of the police officers was delayed for many years. Finally, in 2018, Jeffrey Gidere was fired from the police force, but he appealed and was allowed to return to service in 2020. The commission ruled that he would be demoted to patrolman because of his misconduct and prior disciplinary record. On August 4, 2022, Massachusetts passed Amanda's Law, making it illegal for first responders to take unauthorized photographs of crime scenes. Violating this law is a misdemeanor, punishable by up to a year in jail and/or a $2,000 fine. Prior to the law's passage, Amanda's family had sued the city of Chelmsford, eventually agreeing to a $100,000 settlement. 22-year-old Brandon Gonsalves lived with his small family in Goregaon West. Now, Goregaon West was becoming a crowded suburb in Mumbai city. Besides Gonsalves, his family only consisted of his mother and older sister. On December 19, 2016, like every day, Gonsalves went for a morning walk from his home to Ari Colony. Usually, he would return home within an hour after his stroll, but today he didn't come back until afternoon. Concerned, Gonsalves' mother, Seema, and older sister, Kashma, first called his friends because he had left his phone at home today. Despite contacting some friends, they couldn't find any information about Gonsalves. Now, the sun had already set, and night was slowly falling. Worried about their son, Seema took her daughter and went to the nearby Dindoshi police station to file a missing person report. Now, besides Gonsalves' family and friends, the police are also trying to find him. Meanwhile, the Dindoshi police station had distributed Gonsalves' photo to nearby police stations as well. However, amidst this, around 12:30 in the afternoon on December 22nd, a call comes to the nearby Ari police station. The caller reports that he has just seen a headless body. Upon hearing this, the police promptly rushed to the reported location in Ari Colony. Upon arrival, the scene that witnessed astonishes them. There, beneath a tree, lies a body without a head, neck, or clothes, and upon seeing it, it seemed as if someone had placed it there deliberately. Now, witnessing this sight, the police cordoned off the area completely, not allowing any ordinary person to approach. Afterwards, the police began their investigation by first examining the area nearby. Just 20 meters away from the body, the police found the head and clothes stained with blood. Additionally, a few meters away from the body, the police also found some other items used in worship, such as a mirror, coconut, padukas, threads, turmeric powder, and kumkum powder, aka vermilion. Anyway, the police collected these items and sent the body to a nearby hospital for post-mortem. Subsequently, the files of missing persons were checked at the Ari police station, and the identification of this dead body was made with a boy named Brandon Gonsalves. As I mentioned earlier, the missing report of Brandon Gonsalves had been distributed to all nearby police stations by Dindoshi police. So now the Ari police confirmed that he was the same boy who had gone missing 3 days ago on December 19th. Well, now Gonsalves' family is also informed, and thus the missing case of Gonsalves turns into a murder case. After this, as far as I have read, perhaps the police had to form 8+ teams to search for Gonsalves' killer, including a special team from the crime branch. But seeing the body of her only son in this condition, Gonsalves' mother Seema and elder sister Kashma were both in a terrible state of distress. So much so that when Seema saw her son in this condition, she fainted upon seeing the body. However, the police quickly began their investigation to find the culprits. On the other hand, some shocking details emerged in Gonsalves's post-mortem report. The post-mortem report stated that Gonsalves's tongue, voice box, skin from his right cheek, and even his entire neck were missing, with the neck bone intact. This means that someone had killed Gonsalves so brutally that even the small spine is fragment of our neck, the neck spine, was broken. All these things were horrifying the police because initially, the police thought this case seemed to be a result of personal rivalry, as if someone had killed Gonsalves to settle a score, but the police were soon to be proven wrong. Actually, according to the post-mortem report, it was found that Gonsalves' death occurred due to the separation of his head from his body. However, forensic pathologists also checked whether Gonsalves was given any drugs or substances before being killed, but nothing like that was found in any post-mortem report. After that, the police found out that Gonsalves was murdered 3 days before his body was found, between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. on the same day he went missing. Additionally, there were no signs of any fight, struggle, or injury on his body, indicating that Gonsalves didn't even try to save himself until his last breath. Furthermore, 2 marks were found on Gonsalves' body. Actually, there were 2 cross symbols on his forehead and right hand, which seemed to have been made with a sharp object. After learning about all these things, this case became even more intriguing for the police and investigators, because now there were a lot more questions in front of the police. Looking at Gonsalves' body, it seemed as if his body had been cut twice. First, his head was separated from his shoulders, and then later his neck was cut from the head. Additionally, forensic experts said that where Gonsalves' body was found, there was absolutely no evidence of his murder, if not a single trace of blood was found there. So it was clear that Gonsalves was killed somewhere else, and then some parts of his body were removed to perform some rituals or something similar. Later, his body and clothes were thrown away in this deserted place. Here, when the police found the materials of worship and glass, coconuts, slippers, turmeric, and vermilion at the crime scene, for the first time, this case seems like a human sacrifice. After the possibility arose that Gonsalves might be taken to another location and harmed, the police began checking the CCTV cameras around the Ari colony. But first, they checked the CCTV cameras around his house. They saw Gonsalves leaving with his dog around 7 o'clock in the morning and returning after a morning walk within an hour. However, just 10 minutes later, Gonsalves left his house again, but this time with a bag. Now, what was in that bag could not be determined because the bag itself was not found. But then, a little further from Gonsalves' house, the police spotted a white Audi car in another CCTV footage, with 2 people inside, a driver and a woman in a white Punjabi suit. It was shown in the CCTV that they were following Gonsalves slowly with their car. The woman wearing a white Punjabi suit is given directions to the driver, telling him to take the car in that direction. However, the police also questioned Gonsalves' family members to see if anyone might know that woman and driver, but the police didn't get any good response from there either. The police suspected that there might be more than 2 people in the car, and unfortunately, the day Gonsalves' body was found, the 2 CCTV cameras in that area were not working. This raised suspicion for the police that Gonsalves was abducted on December 19th in this same car and then murdered elsewhere, with his body being thrown in a deserted place in Ari Colony on the dark night or morning of December 22nd. But since then, investigators have felt that perhaps a local person might be involved in this murder case, because the police checked 70-plus CCTV cameras in this entire case, but none of them recorded anything suspicious that would raise suspicion on any individual. The investigators clarified that perhaps the killers were aware of the location of every CCTV camera in the Ari colony. This helped them in escaping from the colony and Goragayan. This clears one thing, that the killer was someone who was well acquainted with Goragayan and the colony, because an outsider couldn't have known every road in CCTV so well. The investigators explored all possible angles of Gonsalves' killing, such as a love affair angle, whether someone jealous killed Gonsalves, and a personal rivalry, human sacrifice angle, robbery, and property dispute. But the police never found any leads in any angle. Although for some time, the police kept the angle of human sacrifice on the table and even questioned several tantrics, babas, and black magicians about the cut parts of the body, the mark of the cross on the forehead and the right hand, whether there was any connection between them or not. But the police didn't get any help from here either. Gonsalves was a middle-class boy who decided to graduate in arts. However, due to some reasons, he dropped out of college as well. His father had passed away 3 years ago, leaving Gonsalves in a state of depression for a long time. During the police investigation, Gonsalves' call records were also checked, but no suspicious numbers were found. In fact, Gonsalves rarely talked to anyone, except for his family, or perhaps 3 or 4 friends. But what intrigued the police in this case was finding a diary in Gonsalves' room. Within it were some sketches that further complicated this case. Actually, if these sketches are examined closely, it will be apparent that they tell the story of 2 sacrifices. In the first, a person is attempting to cut off an animal's head while wearing a suit. Meanwhile, in the second sacrifice, a man's head is being cut off with a saw. In addition to these, an attempt has been made to portray the SpongeBob cartoon character as a monster. On the other side of the page, a picture of a deer without a head has been drawn, and right next to it, only the head of a lion cub has been drawn. Furthermore, when the police went inside Gonsalves' house, they found a strange sign on a wall just behind the door, as if it were some sort of cult symbol. Now, what was even more surprising was that when the Mumbai police tried to recreate the crime scene with Gonsalves' dog, the startling thing was that Gonsalves' dog went straight to where Gonsalves' body was lying with a tree. After a while, his dog arrived at the spot where Gonsalves' body was found, just a few meters away. Among all the cases we've explained on this channel so far, this case was the weirdest, like how Gonsalves' dog somehow went to the places where his body was found. It's possible that when Gonsalves first went out for a walk with his dog on December 19th, he might have already gone to the place where his body was found. Another point is that the white Audi car following Gonsalves might have been known to him, and he might have gone with them willingly, sitting in the car. Additionally, it's possible that after returning home, Gonsalves took the bag with him, which might have contained items related to worship like coconut, paducas, etc. Because it's also being said on the internet that maybe Gonsalves sacrificed himself. Today, it's been over 7 years since this case, but the murderer of Brandon Gonsalves is still unknown. Meanwhile, Gonsalves' mother and sister have made numerous visits to the police station and the crime branch office to find out the status of their son Brandon Gonsalves' murder case. During this time, Gonsalves' mother and sister were afraid that the police might close Gonsalves' murder case. Due to this reason, Seema's elder daughter Kashma appealed to Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the state's chief minister to seek justice. Well, if this case gets solved in the future, we will definitely update you through this channel's community post. But so far, this case remains unsolved. With this, Brandon Gonsalves' case also concludes here. Before moving forward, quickly subscribe to the channel. This is strange. You haven't subscribed to the channel yet. Quickly subscribe to it. Now we are jumped to the next story. This is the story of Madanapalli city in the state of Andhra Pradesh, India, which is Asia's largest tomato market. Besides, there are many mountains here as well. It was January 24th, 2021, around 8:30 p.m. on Sunday night in Madanapalli, when Dr. V. Purushotham Naidu, the head of the Naidu family, called his friend Raju and said on the phone, "Both my daughters are no longer in this world. Alekhya, 27, and Saidivya, 22, have both passed away, but there's nothing to worry about. Tomorrow morning, they will come back through reincarnation because the Kal Yuga is ending, and the Satyug will begin from tomorrow." Upon hearing this, Raju said to his friend Dr. Naidu, "Everything is normal at home? Speaking such language against your daughters doesn't suit you." In response, Dr. Naidu said, "No, Raju, I am telling the truth. In a while, both I and your sister-in-law will leave our bodies in Kal Yuga and be born again in Satyug. Upon hearing this, Dr. Nayadu's friend Raju started feeling extremely restless. Consequently, he abruptly ended the call and within a few minutes arrived at Dr. Nayadu's house. Raju reached there, knocked on the door, and just as the door was about to open, Dr. Nayadu himself appeared, looking completely normal. But when Raju went inside and saw the scene there, his eyes widened in shock, because Dr. Nayadu had spoken the truth. Lying on the ground in the prayer room of his house was the lifeless body of his 27-year-old daughter, Alakia. She had completed her master's in Bhopal and now was preparing for the civil services. Her face was pale, and blood was oozing from various places. After this, Dr. Nayadu took Raju to another room adjacent to the prayer room where the dead body of his 22-year-old daughter, Sai Divya, lay on the ground. She had been struck with a trident of Lord Shiva on her forehead, and a small brass pot placed in the prayer room was inserted into her mouth. The clothes were removed from both bodies, and they were wrapped in red cloth. Additionally, their hair was partially cut, and they were placed in front of the statue of Lord Shiva in the temple. They had scattered many worship materials around the bodies. However, despite seeing the bodies of their daughters, there was no sign of tension or sorrow on the faces of Dr. Naidu and his wife Padmaja. This behavior of his friend and his wife seemed very strange to Raju. Therefore, he bids them goodbye and leaves their house. However, instead of going home, he goes straight to the police station and tells the police the whole story of how these educated parents sacrificed their daughters. He also informs them about the mental condition of Dr. Naidu and his wife. However, the police didn't having little belief in Raju's story after hearing this strange tale. Because for the past year, Dr. Naidu and his family, who had been living in the new house in Madinapal, had earned quite a reputation in the city. Anyway, after that, the police station in charge, along with some officers, directly reached the Naidu family's house. When the police knocked on the door, once again it was Dr. Naidu who opened it. But seeing her husband's friend with him, Padmaja got very angry and started shouting at the police because they had once again disrupted their worship. Now, the argument between the police and the Naidu family had attracted neighbors from nearby. Now, as soon as the police entered the house and saw what was inside, they too were astonished. Later, after hearing Raju, the police realized that it was a case of superstition. Although Mr. and Mrs. Naidu repeatedly tried to convince the police that both their daughters would return to life before sunrise tomorrow, they were just saying that they only need a day's time, and tomorrow morning both our daughters will come back to life. Then you all will be surprised. But the police knew that both girls were dead, so how could they come back to life? Therefore, Mr. and Mrs. Naidu were first explained with great difficulty. But when they still didn't understand, the police showed some firmness and took both of them to the police station. Afterwards, a forensic team was called in to investigate the crime scene. The forensic team continued their examination for some time and then sent the bodies for post-mortem. Now, the police have started investigating both inside and outside the house. Here, the police learned from neighbors of the Naidu family that someone from the family used to go out daily to buy something, but for the past 3 days, no one has come out of the house, nor has anyone gone inside, not even the maid who used to clean the house, as these people did not even call her. After that, the police directly approached the maid, who told them that 3 days ago, she was told by the Nayadus that we are going to perform a special worship in the house for 3 days, and until we call you, do not come to work at the house. On the other hand, upon checking both girls' social media profiles and bookshelves inside the house, the police found out that Alekia highly respects Indian philosopher Osho. On his social media posts, Osho's name appeared repeatedly, indicating that he was one of Alekia's favorite people. Additionally, beside Alekia's dead body, was a book by the spiritual guru Meher Baba. Besides, pictures of Sri Sai Baba, Meher Baba, and Osho were plastered all over their house. Furthermore, neighbors often heard prayers and tantric chants from their house, and several times they saw some swamis entering their house. On the other hand, what was surprising was that just a few days before the murder, Alekia posted twice on her Instagram. In one post, she wrote, "Work is done," and in the second post, "Shiva is coming." Well, only Dr. Nayudu and Padmaja, who were present in the custody, could reveal the truth behind this. However, controlling Padmaja was proving to be extremely difficult for the police. But before the custody, when the police were taking both husband and wife for a COVID test, Padmaja started saying, "I am Shiva myself. Because of my body particles, COVID has spread everywhere. It did not come from China." After getting their COVID tests done, Dr. Naidu informed the police about his background. Actually, Dr. Naidu had a master's in philosophy and science. In addition, he had obtained a PhD and was currently a professor of chemistry at Government Degree College for Women, Nadanapali. His wife, Padmaja, was a gold medalist in mathematics and had been teaching at the famous schools of Madanapal for nearly 23 years, including at Masterminds IIT Talent High School. Alongside, she also had a master's in science. Additionally, Alekia, 27, was a postgraduate from Bhopal and then an aspirant for civil services. Furthermore, Sai Divya, a 22-year-old, was training at the A.R. Rahmar Music Conservatory in Mumbai after completing her Bachelor of Business Administration course. However, due to the lockdown, both of them had to return home. You might also wonder why, with such educated family members, these individuals attempted suicide. You'll find the answer by the end of the video. Afterwards, Alekia picked up Lord Shiva's trident from the temple and thrust it into her sister Divya's forehead. Then a copper vessel was placed in her mouth. Following the death of her younger sister Divya, Alekia told her mother that now she had to kill her. As a result, Padmaja struck Alekia on the head with a dumbbell kept in the house. Consequently, Alekia also died shortly thereafter. After killing both their daughters, both the husband and wife wandered around their bodies for quite some time. Now, because of the insistence of the wife and daughter, it was Dr. Nayudu's turn. Perhaps out of fear, he called his friend and told him the whole matter, and if he hadn't made that call, perhaps neither of them would be in this world today. However, due to this, Padmaja scolded her husband, Dr. Nayudu, a lot, saying, "You are a coward. Because of you, our secret got out, and our daughters couldn't come back." After seeing all this, it was finalized in this case that due to mental illness, all these family members had planned this, and it was revealed from a psychiatrist's source that their entire family was dealing with a rare disorder called shared psychotic disorder. Actually, in this disorder, more than two people who are in close relationships have a similar way of thinking. And it's because of this disorder that Alekia and Sai Divya are no longer in this world today. In this double murder case, Alekia had a Canadian friend who told the print media that he couldn't believe for many days that Alekia could do such a thing. After questioning on Monday evening, funeral of both these girls were performed, and permission for this was given only to Dr. Nayudu, while the girl's mother, Padmaja, was not allowed to participate for some reasons. In my opinion, in this case, Sai Divya and Dr. Purushottam Nayudu seem innocent to me. Although if they hadn't fallen into the temptation of Alekia and Padmaja, perhaps this would have been a happy family today. So with this, the case comes to an end here. Friends, how did you like this combined cases? Do you want to see such combined cases in the future too? Please share your opinion in the comment box. If you appreciate our efforts, like and share this video. If you haven't subscribed, do so now.